Chapter 198. After smoothly helping Long Yuan form his gold core and avoiding the thunder tribulation, which was a deadly tribulation for all Longbow people, Wu Qi had not only become the master who controlled the life and death of their fleshly bodies, he had also become an existence like the great divine magus who dominated their faith. After making up a story and sending away the guards of Zhangli Garden, forbidding them from approaching the cave again, Wu Qi looked up at the cave wall above him, which was split open by the Jin Dan thunder tribulation. He sighed with mixed emotions once again. How angry did the ancestors of Longbow people have to be, that they would send such a tribulation to their descendants? The rock layer, which was over 100 feet thick, was forcefully blasted apart by the airwaves brought up by the thunder tribulation. The power of this heavenly tribulation was simply too frightening. This cave was the place where the alchemists in the imperial palace concocted all sorts of medicinal pills for Yan Dan when he was cultivating in seclusion in Zhangli Garden. Many defensive formations had been deployed in this cave, but none of them could withstand the sudden Jin Dan thunder tribulation. The thunder tribulation of Longbow people truly deserved its reputation. Wu Qi had finally witnessed it today. In the following 7 days, Wu Qi had spent a great deal of effort to concoct a cauldron full of ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup with 100 times the amount of raw materials, and fed it to all the giants of Longbow Kingdom. 99 thunder tribulations kept falling, and Wu Qi guided them into his body with the thunder-stealing spell of 5 elements, helping him to temper his fleshly body and evolve his soul. The thunder tribulation attracted by 100 Longbow people was almost as powerful as the Jin Dan thunder tribulation of 10,000 ordinary human cultivators. Wu Qi's fleshly body was getting stronger and stronger, and after absorbing over 10,000 bolts of Jin Dan thunder tribulation, his soul had formed an insignificant nascent divinity. It was a nascent divinity that could only be formed after the soul had evolved and evolved, a nascent divinity that only formidable cultivators of nascent soul and divinity transformation could possess. A few months ago, when Wu Qi witnessed Princess Zhangli going through the Jin Dan thunder tribulation, he wanted to use the thunder-stealing spell of 5 elements to absorb the heavenly thunder essence qi and use it to condense his vital spirit. Today, he finally succeeded. Just like a piece of pure gold in the desert, the quantitative change led to the qualitative change. As soon as this wisp of primordial spirit was condensed, Wu Qi's nearly substantial soul sense quickly underwent a qualitative change. His soul sense became more and more condensed, more and more sensitive, and more elusive. His divine sense quickly evolved into the divine sense that only cultivators of nascent divinity realm could have, and even Wu Qi's soul began to experience a chain reaction. Wu Qi released his soul sense. Within the range it covered, he could only find the general direction of the flow of spiritual qi and the movements of people. Now that a wisp of his essence soul had been formed, Wu Qi's divine sense was like water ripples that could cover the surroundings. He could clearly feel the changes in every grain of sand on the ground. No matter it was the clarity or sensitivity, it was at least 1,000 times better than his previous sensing ability. Without going through the process of breaking his gold core and forming his nascent soul, he could directly use the power of heavenly thunder to temper his soul and condense a wisp of nascent divinity. Only a heaven-defying technique like the scroll of stealing could create such a miracle. Wu Qi's admiration and gratitude towards that shadowy figure grew stronger. He really had no idea how that shadowy figure actually came up with the cultivation technique found in the scroll of stealing, as it had completely overturned the common sense of the world of cultivators. After putting all 100 Longbow men who had formed the Jin Dan back into the spirit breeding ring, and letting them slowly study and practice the heavenly 100 spirit warring formation, Wu Qi tidied up the messy cave abode. After that, he obediently sat down in the cave abode and consumed some pills, recuperating his body and spirit, preparing to form the Jin Dan with the mystic technique. A few days later, Princess Zhangli, Nia Baihong, Jing Ku, and Gao Jinli arrived at Zhangli Park almost at the same time. Upon seeing them, Princess Zhangli waved her sleeve complacently, throwing out several dozens of jade bottles that shone brightly. She had brought a great amount of spirit pills and medicines from the imperial treasury, which could protect and nourish the corporeal body, and restrain the soul. All these could greatly increase the probability of Wu Qi forming the Jin Dan with the help of external force, lessen the pain he had to suffer, and greatly reduce the risk of his corporeal body being crushed by the impact of external force. Even in Great Yen Dynasty, these spirit pills and medicines were extremely precious. It was unknown how Princess Xianglu had tortured Yen Dan and Yen Qijuan for more than half a month, but only then was she able to obtain these spirit pills and medicines from the core of the imperial treasury. Tilting her chin up proudly, Princess Xianglu smiled and said, "Grandpa is a generous man, but why is father getting more and more stingy as he gets older?" Zi Xian had to pester him for such a long time before he could produce these spirit pills. If not because father is the only one who has the key to the secret chamber, Zi Xian would have long brought back these spirit pills. Jing Ku brought a set of armor of mid-grade magical treasure level, a dozen powerful mechanical concealed weapons produced by Emo sect, 30 Jin Dan which was dug out from the body of a human immortal of Jin Dan, and a great amount of powerful spirit pills that could strengthen one's cultivation and shrink and compress one's energy. The armor was entirely green in color, and on its chest was a huge, three-dimensional sculpture of a dragon head. The eyes of the dragon were actually two 10,000-years-old water essence pearls, while the shoulders, dantian, arms, back, and knees were all inlaid with the same water essence pearls. The armor was constantly emanating a dense water vapor and cold air. Yu Su was one of the few members of Yu clan who did not possess the gold element spirit root, and he was cultivating with the 9-killing technique of Flaming Tiger, which was a fire element spell. The armor contained an immeasurable amount of water element energy, which could perfectly restrain the lethality of water element cultivation technique, and reduce the power of Yu Su's cultivation technique to the minimum. As for the other dozens of mechanical concealed weapons, which were smaller in size but possessed tremendous lethality, they were all powerful weapons created by combining Emo sect's art of mechanism and defensive formation, which possessed the power to severely wound a human immortal of Jin Dan. If Wu Qi used them properly, the explosive power he unleashed could be comparable to the full-force strike of a peak-stage Jin Dan cultivator. As for the water element water dragon armor, MOD had given it to Jing Ku in a friendly manner. As for these mechanical concealed weapons with tremendous lethality, Jing Ku had spent a great deal of effort to convince MOD, and asked him to personally craft them within half a month. Nia Baihong brought the dustless lamp. It was the dustless lamp that he and Nia Yanu took out from the Immortal's Cave of Sword Stems from the Mind, after they had solemnly taken a bath and changed their clothes and reported to their ancestral master. Forming the Jin Dan with the help of external forces was a truly evil technique that defied the heaven and changed one's destiny. Once the Jin Dan was formed, there would be countless external devils and inner devils attacking from both inside and outside. As long as he was protected by the dustless lamp, no matter it was the inner devils or the external heavenly devils, none of them would be able to hurt Wu Qi. However, as the essence of the dustless lamp had been stolen by Wu Qi, the only reason why Nia Baihong brought it here was to let Wu Qi feel grateful for his good intention. As for Gao Jianli, with both hands clasped behind his back, Gao Jianli was pacing back and forth in the cave. He claimed that he was here to protect Wu Qi, helping him form the Jin Dan smoothly. But, judging from his expression and demeanor, he was just here to watch the fun. Or perhaps, he was just here to show his solidarity with Jing Ku. As for whether Wu Qi could form the Jin Dan smoothly, he did not really care about that. Furthermore, Wu Qi could even tell from something that flashed briefly in the depth of Gao Jianli's eyes that he did not take the duel between him and Yu Su to heart. In the eyes of these people, be it Yu Su or Wu Qi, they were just chess pieces placed on the chessboard by someone, bathing in blood and killing each other. No matter how intense the battle was, a chess piece was just a chess piece. Apart from letting them see the situation on the chessboard clearly, they had no other purpose. Gao Jianli's indifferent attitude made Wu Qi very uncomfortable. Because of this uncomfortable feeling, Wu Qi did not answer the questions from the crowd about why the cave was cracked open by the thunderbolts. Instead, he sat straight down in the cave and began exercising the qi circulating technique of 5 elements. The crowd thought he was thinking about the duel of life and death with Yu Su, and thought he was very nervous. Therefore, they did not take Wu Qi's rudeness seriously. Following the steps they had discussed beforehand, they began to act. Nia Baihong hung the dustless lamp above the cave, unleashing a large sheet of green light that enveloped Wuqi's body. Princess Xianglu then activated the energy-gathering formation underneath the cave, attracting a huge amount of natural energies and shrouding Wuqi's body, improving the success rate of him forming his gold core. Gao Jianli placed both palms on the ground and stood guard at the entrance of the cave, preventing any outsiders from entering and threatening Wuqi. Meanwhile, Jing Ke was holding a huge amount of spirit herbs and Jin Dan that he plundered, sitting right opposite to Wuqi. He was the one who truly helped Wuqi form his gold core with the mystic technique. Not only did he have to restrain the rampaging medicinal strength and Jin Dan energies in Wuqi's body, he also had to help Wuqi resist the thunder tribulation of Jin Dan. By forcibly devouring the Jin Dan and all kinds of spirit herbs that could increase one's cultivation base, one could forcefully form the Jin Dan. Every single Taoist sect had a similar mystic technique. Putting aside the fact that the death rate of using this mystic technique was very high, even if one succeeded in forming the Jin Dan, as the Jin Dan was a sudden increase in strength and not the energy cultivated by oneself, once the thunder tribulation of Jin Dan struck down, those who formed their gold core with the mystic technique would not be able to resist it. Even if 10,000 people formed their gold core with the mystic technique, 10,000 of them would still be struck to death by the thunder tribulation. No one would be spared. At this point of time, Jing Ke was needed to stop the thunder tribulation, fighting for a slim chance of survival for Wuqi. Wuqi himself did not take the mystic technique of forming his gold core seriously, as it was just a pretense. However, Princess Xianglu and the others treated it very seriously, especially Princess Xianglu. While controlling the operation of the energy-gathering formation, she was so nervous that she nearly fainted. He gave Princess Xianglu a look, who was busy performing an incantation gesture and reciting a spell. Wuqi smiled, then grabbed 3 Jin Dan, which were emanating an enormous ripple of energy, and swallowed them into his stomach. Wuqi's action scared Jing Ke so much that the muscles on his face were twitching, fearing that Wuqi would explode in the next moment. However, Wuqi's performance had taken everyone by surprise. He did not suffer too much pain or struggle, and did not experience any complicated transformation. After he finished all 30 Jin Dan and all the spirit herbs that could increase one's cultivation base brought by Jing Ke, he circulated his energy 36 times according to the qi circulating technique of 5 elements, and finally, a Jin Dan was formed in his dantian. All this was even easier than forming the Jin Dan for the people of Longbo Kingdom. Everything happened so naturally, without any obstacles. Right after the Jin Dan was formed, a faint 5-colored mist suddenly emerged from behind Wuqi's back, then gradually merged into a hazy and faint dark mist. Amidst the dark mist, a tiny and hazy sort of greedy wolf could be vaguely seen. It was moving back and forth soundlessly in the mist, and did not produce any reflection or ear-piercing sound. This was the strange sign that occurred after Wuqi formed the Jin Dan using the qi cultivation technique of heaven-breaking sword sect. Although he had long formed the Jin Dan in his 7 stealing heaven meridians, there was a mystic technique in scroll of stealing that could conceal his aura. Thus, no strange sign could be detected. Now, when the strange sign of Wuqi's Jin Dan appeared, Princess Xianglu was screaming excitedly, Gao Jianli and Jing Ke had a very strange expression on their faces, and Nia Baihong nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. The sword technique of heaven-breaking sword sect was ferocious and unparalleled, and the sword force was extremely overbearing. That was why it was called heaven-breaking sword sect. However, no matter how one looked at the strange sign of Wuqi's Jin Dan, it looked like a sneaky thief carrying a dagger and was about to slice someone's neck from behind. Why did it look so strange? The natural energies from the surrounding kept rushing into Wuqi's dantian. As the foundation he had laid down was too solid, when his Jin Dan was formed, its quality was already comparable to the Jin Dan of an ordinary middle-stage Jin Dan cultivator. A huge amount of natural energies kept rushing into his dantian, and the rapid influx of natural energies had even created a small storm around him. A thin dark cloud came rushing over weakly from outside the cave, sprinkling down 3 thin and malnourished electric arcs like a chicken peeing. Just like that, Wuqi's Jin Dan thunder tribulation had gone through easily. Jing Ke did not even need to strike, as the restrictive spell of the cave had already blocked the electric arcs. Gao Jianli was struck dumb. This is defying the heaven, changing one's destiny, forming the Jin Dan using an evil technique, by devouring a cultivator's Jin Dan. Such a heaven-defying act will be taboo by the heaven, and he will be struck by 100 thunderbolts. So, this is the thunder tribulation of Wu Qi. Isn't his life a little too good? Wu Qi smiled shyly and nodded his head at Gao Jianli. After that, the overly excited Princess Zhanglu had leaped onto his body. Chapter 199. Today was the day of the duel between Wu Qi and Yu Su. Early in the morning, a thick, leaden cloud had already blanketed Ji City. Snowflakes the size of a child's palm kept falling from the sky, giving the city an air of desolation. In such a harsh weather, apart from those who had to go out, the rest of the people would rather stay at home with their wives and children. Who would want to go out and suffer the cold? On the drill ground of the imperial palace of Great Yen, banners were fluttering in the wind, and battle cries were rumbling like thunder. An imperial army consisting of 10,000 imperial eunuchs, clad in heavy armors and holding heavy sabers that measured 15 feet long, was practicing a battle formation in the drill ground. Drums were beating like thunder, bugles shaking the sky. 10,000 imperial army soldiers were running back and forth on the drill ground, measuring a few miles in both width and length. Their murderous aura shattered the snowflakes falling from the sky, and the accumulated snow on the ground had been melted into water by the heat emitted from their bodies. On the observation stands surrounding the drill ground, several thousand of the most influential members of Great Yen dynasty, including Yen Dan, were sitting on the throne, quietly watching the drill of the imperial army. After a full 2 hours of drill, when those imperial army soldiers were soaked in sweat and kept dripping down through the gaps of their armors, Yen Dan, who was sitting on the throne, slowly raised his right hand. Standing next to Yen Dan, Ma Yi cried out sternly, "His Majesty has decreed, stop the drill." Ma Yi's loud cry made 10,000 imperial army soldiers halt immediately. They lined up into a phalanx formation in the drill ground of Chi-Chi, then knelt down on one knee toward Yen Dan. When the knees of these heavily armored imperial army soldiers touched the ground, a thunderous sound rang out, shaking the surrounding palaces and pavilions, and causing the accumulated snow on the roof tiles to slide down from the tiles. Yen Dan nodded his head satisfyingly, then said coolly, "Not bad. I can tell that all of you have put in a lot of effort in your daily training. Each of you will be rewarded with 20 gold coins. You are dismissed." Ma Yi stuck out his chest and cried out sternly, "His Majesty has decreed that every imperial army soldier will be rewarded with 10 gold coins." "Thank you." One after another, all the imperial army soldiers bowed their heads and shouted, "Long live the emperor." After that, they rose to their feet in unison and strode out of the drill ground. A sonorous beast cry rang out. Yu Su, who had been waiting impatiently for a long time, carried his golden spear and rode into the drill ground on his golden-eyed Qilin horse. He swaggered back and forth on the drill ground for 3 rounds before finally sitting on the back of his horse and cupping his fists toward Yen Dan. "Your Majesty, Duke of Tianyun, please come out." Yen Dan coughed softly and turned his head to look at a curtain wrapped in purple brocade under a reading platform on the west side. Looking down from above, he could clearly see every single movement behind the curtain. With the help of Meng Xiaobai and a few other men, Wu Qi, who was clad in a pale green undershirt, was slowly putting on an inner layer of golden silk soft armor, then a chain mail armor in the middle. Finally, he put on a layer of Great Yen standard green steel armor. This set of triple armor weighed more than 380 kilograms, and the process of wearing it was extremely complicated. On top of that, Meng Xiaobai and the others did not have the experience of helping someone put on an armor. As a result, even after a full 15 minutes, Wu Qi still had not finished putting on the armor. Princess Zhanglu was standing on the reading platform right next to the curtain. She poked half of her body out from the railing, waving her hands and scolding Meng Xiaobai, "Idiot Xiaobai, you've buckled the hook in the wrong place. That is the crotch guard. Why are you putting it on your chest? Don't buckle the heart guard mirror on your buttocks. Do you guys know how to wear heavy armor? Do you even know how to wear heavy armor? Yan Dan narrowed his eyes and suddenly laughed. Shaking his head, he turned to Yu Su and said, Yu Su, Duke of Tianyun is still putting on the armor. Just wait for a moment. Yu Su's face turned blue with anger. He turned his mount around and glared at the direction of the curtain. Suddenly, he roared at the top of his voice, Wu Qi, how dare you hurt my son for no reason? Today, I, Yu Su, will make you pay with your blood. Right on the reading platform where Princess Zhanglu was standing, Lu Qingfeng had his hands clasped behind his back, staring straight at Yu Su with a gloomy face. After staring fixedly at Yu Su for a long while, Lu Qingfeng snorted and said word by word in a low voice, if even a single hair of Wu Qi's is harmed today, I swear that sooner or later, I'll use the heaven and earth overturning 3 lives tribulations formation and slaughter every single member of Yu clan. Lu Qingfeng had kept his voice extremely low, but the group of over 20 young men who were dressed like scholars could hear him loud and clear. They exchanged a glance, then nodded their heads at the same time. These young men were the sons of concubines from the influential clans of Lu Kingdom, who had received the letter from Lu Qingfeng and came to Ji City from the Lu Kingdom. At this point in time, they had already taken up various positions under Lu Qingfeng's tutelage, which had greatly alleviated the shortage of talents in Lu Qingfeng's Duke Yan Li's mansion. Now, Lu Qingfeng was their master. As the saying goes, when the master is humiliated, the ministers must die. Their life and death, honor and disgrace had become one with Lu Qingfeng, so naturally, they had to advance and retreat together. Lu Ziyuan, who had lost an arm, stood gingerly next to Lu Qingfeng. He too was staring at Yu Su with his teeth clenched tightly. He murmured under his breath, elder brother, why don't we hire an assassin with a large sum of money and kill this Yu Su today? Back in Little Meng City, Wu Qi had forced Lu Ziyuan to swear allegiance to Lu Qingfeng, and Lu Qingfeng had accepted Lu Ziyuan's surrender. Now, Lu Ziyuan had come to Ji City together with these sons of concubines and the army of 15,000 soldiers. Lu Qingfeng had arranged Lu Ziyuan to be his personal advisor, helping him deal with all sorts of trivial matters. During the 1 month when Wu Qi was in secluded cultivation, Lu Ziyuan had performed quite well. It was also because of Lu Ziyuan's excellent performance by Lu Qingfeng's side that Lu Ziyuan's father, who was also Lu Qingfeng's second uncle, was the only person from the Liang Lu clan who was able to keep his life, title, and official position. Lu Qingfeng gave Lu Ziyuan a look, snorted coldly and said, write this down. If anything happens to Wu Qi today, even if I have to exhaust all the financial resources in my mansion, I will hire an expert to kill Yu Su. He paused for a brief moment, then frowned and said, keep the goodies within the family. Master, please do it. Lu Ziyuan answered and glared at Yu Su with a pair of bloodshot eyes, sharing the same hatred. Yu Su, who was roaring and cursing wantonly in the drill ground, could no longer control the anxiety in his heart. Once again, he rode on his mount and galloped away. He had been suppressing his anger for 1 month, and he could no longer hold it in any longer. Not only did Wu Qi injure his son, but the acquired spirit gold pearls in his mansion were also stolen by someone, and that was the real problem. For the past 1 month, Yu Su had lost his appetite, and could not sleep well. His mental state was on the verge of collapsing. He dared not imagine what Yu Yi's reaction would be if he knew that the acquired spirit gold pearl he had spent 30 cities to purchase was stolen. He only knew that he needed to vent his anger, and he had to vent it on Wu Qi. Only by killing Wu Qi in the cruelest way could he redeem everything. Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen, had promised Yu Su that if he could kill Wu Qi in public in the drill ground, he would give Yu Su an acquired spirit gold pearl he had collected 300 years ago. No matter it was for the personal grudge between him and Wu Qi, or for the sake of this acquired spirit gold pearl, Yu Su had to kill Wu Qi. After galloping for a few rounds, Yu Su threw his head back and roared into the sky, Wu Qi, you punk. Come out and fight me. What are you doing? Are you a coward? Sitting on the throne, Yan Dan frowned, shook his head, sighed and said, Yu Su is not worthy of being put in an important position. If the Qin army attacks us, let him be the vanguard. Ma Yi gave Yan Dan a look, bowed slightly and agreed to the task. After a brief hesitation, Ma Yi said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, are you not going to stop this duel? This is not a personal grudge between Yu Su and Wu Qi, but between two chief generals, they." Yan Dan gave Ma Yi a sidelong glance, sneered, and said, "Stop it." "Why should I stop it?" Abruptly, Yan Dan rose to his feet, let out a long laugh and said, "Dear ministers and ministers, today, the vanguard general Yu Su is going to have a life-and-death duel with Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi. The men of Great Yen are the most courageous and fond of martial arts. When a man has a grudge, he should settle it with a blade and a sword. He is not allowed to play tricks in the dark. For such a grand event, I will be the banker. If anyone is interested, please place your bet." After a few loud laughs, Yan Dan narrowed his eyes and said, "Both sides will bet on each other. No matter how much both sides place their bets, I will be responsible for collecting the bets. Ha ha ha, since everyone is looking for some fun, I will not take any commission from it. Let's bet on each other with a clear price. Who is interested in placing a bet?" Ma Yi waved his hand, and a few young eunuchs quickly brought out a small table, along with some writing brushes, ink, paper, and inkstones. Ma Yi sat on his knees behind the table, getting ready to register the bets. Almost immediately after Yan Dan finished his words, Jing Ke's voice rang out, "Jing Ke, bet on Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi. I bet 100 sealed cities, 10 energy stone veins, 50 rare and precious metal veins, 10 gold mountains, 10 silver mountains, 10 bronze mountains, 10 iron mountains, 10 fish farms, salt farms, pearl farms, wood farms, sandalwood forests, Namu forests, golden threaded cypresses forests, and 10 10,000-year-old Bodhi trees." He cleared his throat, smiled faintly and said, "My wife is very strict with me, and I only have these private stashes to pay for the wine. Who is interested in making a bet with me?" Right after Jing Ke finished his words, Gao Jianli's voice rang out again, "Gao Jianli, also bet on Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi. My bet is the same as Jing Ke's. Let me add something more. I have 3 wine cellars at least 1,000 years old in a manor outside the city. I'll bet all of them." Suddenly, Jing Ke roared furiously, "Gao Jianli, you rascal! How could you bet all these wine cellars?" Gao Jianli snorted coldly, but did not answer Jing Ke's words. Yan Dan clapped his hands and laughed out loud, "All right, both Jing Ke and Gao Jianli have placed their bets. Is there anyone who dares to accept?" A deep and powerful voice rang out, "I'd like to make a bet with Chief General and Lieutenant Prime Minister. I'll accept all the bets from both of you." Yan Dan narrowed his eyes and smiled, nodding his head and saying, "Xian Chen has accepted the bets from both of you. Is there anyone else who wants to join in?" Suddenly, Qin Wuyang cried out, "Elder brother Jing Ke, Wuyang will bet with you today. I bet that Yu Su will defeat Wu Qi. Wuyang doesn't have a lot of money, so I'll bet 30 sealed cities, 7 spirit stone veins, and 30 rare metal veins for a game. The rest of the bets will be 60% of yours. Are you willing to bet more?" An old and deep voice rang out, "Little Wuyang, since you've said so, I'll bet with you. Tian Guang, I still have some private money that I can afford to keep some concubines. I'll bet with Qin Wuyang as well. This old man will also bet 20 cities, 10 different mineral veins, and 30 different gold mines." The sudden participation of Qin Wuyang and Tian Guang had turned the atmosphere in the drill ground into a very strange state. Not long after that, a voice rang out, "Hao Yingzheng Feng, I'll accept old Mister's bet. I'll increase the bet by 30%. Is there anyone who wants to accept it?" Very soon, several hundred influential members of Great Yen Dynasty had joined this grand gamble. Among them, 70% bet that Yu Su would win, while 30% agreed with Jing Ke and Gao Jianli, betting that Wu Qi would win. As for the remaining several thousand influential members, they did not have the status, wealth, or courage. They just stood there and watched both sides place their bets, and none of them dared to say anything. However, when it came to the bets, the people represented by Jing Ke and Gao Jianli were at an absolute disadvantage. As the number of people on the opposite side was greater than theirs, the huge amount of bets they put together was at least 2 times more than theirs. If Jing Ku and Gao Jianli insisted on taking out the corresponding amount of bets, it would most likely hurt the fundamental interests of their clans. Jing Ku clenched his teeth, and as he was about to take out a sufficient amount of bets to fight against the opposite side, Mod and Su Qin suddenly appeared on the platform behind Yan Dan. Mod said softly, Mo sect will bear all the bets that Jing Ku and Gao Jianli lack. Su Qin even chuckled and said, besides that, Su Qin will bet 30% of the total amount of bets that Wu Qi will win this round. Who wants to accept it? Chapter 200. Indifferently, Yan Dan said, fine, Yan Dan swears with my prime divine soul that if Yu Su defeats Wu Qi, when we join hands to deal with Daqin dynasty, Yan Dan will obey all reasonable orders given by Lao Ai. Raising his right hand up high, Yan Dan's wrist suddenly split open and sprayed out a stream of blood, which then condensed into a blood bead glinting with runes and exploded. Yu Su let out a wild cry in anger. While coughing out the blood, he rose to his feet and charged towards Wu Qi with the spear in his hand. The cultivation base of Jin Dan. Lao Ai and Yan Xianchen roared together as if they had just seen a ghost. Then, Yan Dan giggled like a hen who had just eaten some millet. Lao Ai, Wu Qi has taken a risk by using a mystic technique to seize the energy and condense the pill. Within 1 month, he has formed the Jin Dan, and is now able to control the acquired spirit pearl to hurt someone. Do you think a Dan is so easily tricked? Yu Su sneered, raised the golden spear high up into the sky and gave a long and mighty cry, Wu Qi, the enmity between you and me will be settled today. Everyone on the drill ground had their expressions changed, turning to look at Lao Ai with a strange look. The great sun magic could regrow a broken limb. Frowning and pondering for a while, Yan Dan sneered and said, Lao Ai, what makes you think you can bet with me? Wu Qi gave the bull-headed beast's head a fierce slap with the spear, then gave a loud roar and interrupted Yu Su's words, cut the crap. You want to kill me, isn't it because Yan Xianchen has promised your son to marry Princess Xianglu? You want to kill me, isn't it because Yan Xianchen has promised you that he can regrow that broken limb of yours? Lao Ai, Yan Xianchen, what enmity do I have with you? Why are you targeting Wu Qi like this? A loud boom rang out, as the 2 spirit pearls smashed viciously onto Yu Su's chest, shattering his heavy armor into pieces. Blood burst out from his 7 apertures, and he howled miserably as he was knocked flying a mile away. The Qilin horse he was riding on was even blown away by the strong wind brought about by the 2 spirit pearls, and its huge body exploded into pieces. Lao Ai looked at Yan Dan in surprise, shook his head, and said with a sigh, so your highness already knows? I thought you didn't know. However, this kind of trifling matter didn't matter. Does your highness have the guts to accept the wager? Yu Su was struck dumb, Yan Xianchen was struck dumb, and Lao Ai was struck dumb. On the platform, Yan Dan's expression did not change at all. He shouted, Mr. Su Qin, take out 30% of the total bet and bet on Marquis Tian Yun Wu Qi's victory. Does anyone dare to accept Mr. Su Qin's bet? Yan Dan nodded his head slowly, then said with a deep voice, the commandment of Great Yan Imperial Clan has only one purpose. Only the true elites are allowed to stay in Great Yan's imperial court. Those who are eliminated must go into secluded cultivation. If they want to survive in this world, if they don't do this, Great Yan would have been wiped out by the barbarians more than 10 times. Xianchen, you've done well. You've taken Lao Ai as your master, colluding with Wei clan for many years, haven't you? Wu Qi turned his head and looked at Yan Dan. Lao Ai gave a creepy smile. He gave Wu Qi a look, who had retracted all his aura, and said complacently, if Lao Ai still loses like this, he will really enter the palace and become a eunuch. Hee, as long as you, Yan Dan, have the guts to accept it, Lao Ai will really enter the palace and become a eunuch. Ha. He could not say something like executing his entire clan. No matter what, Yu Yi was the meritorious minister who had followed Yan Dan and established Great Yan dynasty. he could not execute his entire clan. Yan Dan pondered for a brief moment. He gave Yan Xianchen a look, who stood respectfully next to Lao Ai, then suddenly burst into a loud laughter and said, "Xianchen, what do you want to say?" Yan Dan gave Jing Ke a look. He paused for a brief moment, then added, "Of course, once we've killed Ing Zheng, all his women and daughters will belong to me. I've fucked his birth mother, and now, I'm going to fuck all his women and daughters." Lao Ai gave a strange smile, then stuck out his lower body complacently, pointing his erect lower body at Yan Dan. All of a sudden, his handsome and evil face was filled with madness, evil, and insanity. His wrist was cut open, and a stream of blood shot out from it. Lao Ai repeated the oath Yan Dan made with a loud voice. If Wu Qi defeated Yu Su, once Daqin's army attacked Great Yan, Lao Ai and Yan Dan would join hands to fight against Daqin. As long as Yan Dan did not give any random order that would send Lao Ai to his death or suicide, Lao Ai would definitely obey the military order. The blood condensed into a blood pearl of oath, then gradually disintegrated amidst the blinking runes. All of a sudden, from the viewing platform where Yan Xianchen, the Prince of Ren, was heard a voice that was slightly hoarse, yet powerful, filled with charm and an indescribable sense of evil. "In that case, Lao Ai will accept the 30% stake. Crown Prince, Your Highness Dan, it has been many years since we last met. It looks like everything is well." Lao Ai was so angry that his limbs were trembling. Disregarding everything, he screamed, "Yu Su, stand up. Kill this guy for me. Or else, don't ever think about inheriting the great sun magic, and don't ever think about repairing that precious arm of yours that was chopped off by someone." Muffled footsteps rang out, as Fan Yuqi, a tall and burly man who looked like a muscular brick, clad in a heavy armor, came standing behind Yan Dan. Narrowing his eyes, Fan Yuqi gave the crowd of Great Yan's influential officials a glance. A murderous aura emanated from him, and many ministers bowed their heads instinctively. After a long silence, Yan Dan laughed, shook his head, sighed and said, "Could it be that none of you can win Mr. Su Qin's private money? Yu Su has the cultivation base of Jin Dan's peak, while Wu Qi is just a Xiantian Daoist. In this duel, Wu Qi will definitely die. If I were not the banker, I would have to make a move and earn a fortune." What shocked Wu Qi was that, although Jing Ku, Gao Jianli, and Tian Guang were close friends, why was Qin Wuyang standing on the opposite side of Jing Ku and the others? Obviously, Qin Wuyang was in cahoots with the power represented by Yu Su. On the other hand, those who supported Yu Su included the young clans such as Haoyin clan, and the members of Great Yan Imperial clan, such as Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen. When he was about 1,000 feet away from Wu Qi, a sheet of flame burst out from Yu Su's back, amidst which, a fierce red tiger slowly emerged. The scorching temperature had turned the snowflakes that kept falling from the drill ground into water vapor and drifted away in the air. Wu Qi patted on the armor forcefully. He had put on the heavy armor, and mounted on a three-headed bull-headed beast with green scales and flaming hooves, which was given by Jing Ku. It was a demon beast with 3 heads, and its body was covered in green scales. It had a very strong defensive strength, and could travel several tens of thousands of miles in a day by breathing fire from its feet. With 3 heads, this 3-headed bull-headed beast had a combat strength comparable to a demon immortal who had formed his demon core. It was one of the top magical beasts used as a mount in Great Yan Dynasty. Wu Qi answered weakly, then controlled the bull-headed beast and walked slowly out from the curtain. He was clad in a heavy armor, holding an iron-tipped spear with a pewter stick in his hand as he walked slowly towards Yu Su. Yan Xianchen's body trembled once again. Lao Ai breathed out a deep sigh, shook his head and said, "Lao Ai's godson is a vicious and merciless man. He even killed Lao Ai, his fake father, without any hesitation. He is not someone we can provoke. If we don't join hands, I'm afraid we won't be able to handle him." When Princess Zhanglu heard Wu Qi's roar, she was so angry that her brows shot up. She leaped up, pointed her finger at Yu Su and snapped, "Yu Su, don't ever let me see your son again, or I'll kill him myself. Who do you think you are? How dare you use me as a bargaining chip? Bastard, do you still have the responsibility of being a minister? I'll definitely kill your entire clan. Standing next to Princess Zhanglu, Bai Zhuer, and a few ghost immortals leaped forward and covered Princess Zhangli's little mouth with their hands. How could Wu Qi know about these things? How could he know? How could he possibly know? Narrowing his eyes, Yan Dan laughed and said, Lao Ai, I can't believe you've been hiding in Great Yen. I never expected this. You couldn't hold it in any longer, so you came out. Standing behind the curtain and having Meng Xiaobai and the others help him put on the heavy armor, Wu Qi looked coldly at the storm that was taking place on the drill ground, his heart twisting into a tight knot. It might seem absurd for Yan Dan to use the duel between his ministers to start a bet, but what was even more absurd was that all the ministers of Great Yen dynasty had really bet an astronomical figure on the duel. Looking at Yu Su, who was stunned and unable to speak, Wu Qi did not have the thought of having a fair duel. His gold core stirred in his dantian, and a huge stream of energy burst out. The acquired pearls of Earth Spirit and Wood Spirit, which were wheeling restlessly around the gold core, transformed into two bright beams and shot out from his mouth. Taking a deep breath, Yan Dan cried out, Wu Qi, if you can win today, I'll promote you to the title of Duke with gold seal and purple ribbon. A strange smile appeared on Yan Dan's face. He nodded his head slowly and said, Very good. I never expected to get such a great reward. Lao Ai, before I could figure out how to deal with you, you actually jumped out yourself. Lao Ai narrowed his eyes and laughed, I can't hold it in any longer, I really can't. Initially, I was thinking of controlling the Great Yen dynasty from the dark, and reap more benefits. But when that Zhang Yi came, I couldn't hold it in any longer. How about this, I'll accept the 30% bet from old Mr. Su Qin. Not only that, I'll also bet that if Wu Qi wins the duel, Lao Ai will obey His Highness' orders when he is fighting against Ding Zheng. What do you think? A short eunuch walked out from behind Yan Xianchen. With every step he took, his body would grow taller, and the inner eunuch robe he wore was ripped to shreds. In the end, the tall and burly Lao Ai appeared in front of the crowd. With both hands clasped behind his back, he looked at Yan Dan from afar, smiled and said, Your Highness, Daqin has arrived at the doorstep of Great Yen dynasty. His Highness can no longer hold it in any longer, and is about to clean up the imperial court. Lao Ai can no longer hold it in any longer, and has to think of a way to deal with that godson of mine. Jing Ke nodded his head, clenched his right fist and swung it forcefully. Yan Dan gave Lao Ai a deep look, then said in a low voice, I believe we all know the difference between the overall strength of Wu Qi and Yu Su. Patting the bull-headed beast, whose eyes were gleaming with a fierce gleam, Wu Qi turned to look at Lao Ai, who was standing on the platform. The words spoken by Lao Ai were as vulgar as those hooligans on the street. It was not hard to imagine the character of this man. Nevertheless, his latent power was indeed tremendous. After operating in Great Yen dynasty for over 2,000 years, Lao Ai actually had enough confidence to stand before Yan Dan. Yan Dan's voice echoed across the drill ground. The cold wind blew the snowflakes into all directions, spreading Yan Dan's voice to all directions. Lao Ai raised a finger, smiled and said, based on the fact that 30% of the captains in your Great Yen army are the disciples of Great Sun sect. Based on the overall strength of 30% of Great Yan's elite soldiers, I don't think it's too much for Lao Ai to ask for a title of king, right? Well, there's no need for me to think of another title. Let's just call it Prince of Changxin. I like this title. It reminds me of Ying Zheng's birth mother. After all, she had given birth to 2 sons for me. If not for Mod and Su Qin, the power formed by Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, and Tian Guang, who served Yan Dan for many years, would have been suppressed by the power behind Yu Su. Although it was just a bet that looked like a joke, it had actually represented the strength of Great Yen imperial court. Lao Ai said impatiently, if Wu Qi had also formed the Jin Dan, Lao Ai would never stand out and bet with you today. You know my temper. I won't do anything that I don't have full confidence in. I won't do anything that I can't take advantage of. If Wu Qi can defeat Yu Su today, Lao Ai will swear that when dealing with Ying Zheng, he will obey your orders wholeheartedly. He raised his head abruptly, bowed deeply to Yan Dan and said, Xianchen is unfilial. But, I don't want to be stripped of my title of king and all my power just because I made a mistake. Therefore, I can only cultivate in Cloud Swallow Pavilion. Power and wealth, I can't bear to part with it. The commandment of Great Yan Imperial Clan is too harsh for us, the kings of Imperial Clan. I'm just trying my best to struggle. Chapter 201. Being treated as a chess piece is a sad thing. Looking at Yu Su, who was charging crazily at him, Wu Qi said coldly, In the future, I will not be a chess piece. Instead, I will devour those who play chess pieces one by one. But a trash like you. I must be blind to choose you as my chess piece. Patting on the ox-headed beast, Wu Qi stretched out his left hand. Clang! A crisp ringing echoed out, as a black, flat metal box, 1 foot and 3 inches long, emerged from the back of his hand, hovering about 3 inches above his arm. He sent his divine will into the box, and immediately, 2 thin crossbow arms popped out from both sides of the box, looking like the wings of a bird. As he injected his energy into the box, the crossbow arms automatically bent and knocked. After that, 3 crisp ringing noises rang out, as 3 9 inches long, thin bolts shot out from the box. The bolts had no feathers, and their arrowheads were shaped like wolf fangs, with blood grooves on them. 36 layers of armor-piercing runes were engraved on the inside of the arrowheads, while the same 36 layers of gale runes were engraved on the tail. The bolts pierced through the air, leaving a several hundred feet long green beam in the air. Accompanied by ear-splitting whistling noises, they pierced through the distance of 1,000 feet and came right before Yu Su's face. Yu Su cried out in shock as he thrust his spear forward. His body stopped abruptly, and he swept the golden spear horizontally, hitting accurately onto the 3 bolts. Dang, dang, dang. 3 loud clangs rang out, as Yu Su's huge body was knocked back by the tremendous force attached to the tiny bolts. He took a dozen steps back in a row. Raging flames burst out from under his feet, and with every step he took, it was as if a small bomb was exploding under his feet, opening up several tens of feet wide holes on the sturdy ground of the drill ground. Shockingly, 3 holes the size of corn grains were left on his golden spear, and the numerous runes engraved on the body of the flood dragon coiled around the spear's shaft were disrupted. The once glinting golden spear became much dimmer. Immortal striking crossbow from Imo sect. With both hands trembling, Yu Su glared furiously at Wu Qi, who was standing over 1,000 feet away. Looking at the flat metal box hovering above his arm, Wu Qi shook his head and said, I have no idea what this thing is called. Chief General Jing Ke gave it to me. If you want to blame someone, blame Jing Ke. By the way, this immortal killing crossbow was personally refined by old Mr. MOD. If you're killed by it, your Lu clan can seek revenge on old Mr. MOD, but don't look for me. On the reviewing platform, Jing Ke was gulping down mouthfuls of wine, laughing in a low voice. Standing next to Yan Dan, MOD shook his head and said, This kid is so cunning. Although this immortal killing crossbow was personally refined by MOD, he was the one who used it to kill people. If it weren't for Jing Ke, MOD wouldn't have refined such a lethal weapon. 3 tiny bolts were bounced off by Yu Su's golden spear and flew several hundred feet away, clanking noisily as they landed on the ground. MOD narrowed his eyes and glanced at the bolts on the ground. Suddenly, he sighed and said, The arrowheads have turned blue. They must have been poisoned. The blue light condensed and did not disperse. It contained a watery glow, which should be the venomous saliva of the viper. The heavens bear witness that none of the weapons forged by MOD have been coated with poison. With his hands clasped behind his back, Su Qin smiled and said, To coat the bolts personally forged by old Mr. Mo with poison, I like this kid. MOD twitched his mouth, shook his head and said with a smile, This kid is not bad. It's just that he is a little bit vicious. But, in this world, if one is not vicious, one will not be able to survive. While the few of them were chatting and laughing, Yusu had already let out a furious roar. A flaming cloud rushed out from under his feet, as he stepped on it and flew up into the sky. With a wave of his hand, several dozens of blood-red fireballs, the size of water tanks, shot whistling down from all directions towards Wu Qi. All kinds of cultivation techniques cultivated by Yu clan were more suitable for close combat with enemies on the battlefield. They focused on tempering their corporeal bodies and strengthening their energies, but they did not have much understanding in spells and Taoist techniques. Therefore, flying on clouds and attacking with high-temperature fireballs were the only two divine abilities that Yusu knew. Looking at the high-temperature fireballs falling down from above, Wu Qi scanned through them with his divine will. The temperature in the core of these fireballs was about 3,000 degrees Celsius, which was strong enough to melt gold and iron, and even ordinary rocks would be melted into lava. Any Taoist or warrior below the realm of Jin Dan would definitely have their body turned into ashes when struck by these fireballs, and even their souls would be destroyed. Wu Qi laughed mockingly, casually raising his right hand and throwing out several dozens of punches with ease. The punches shattered the air, bringing up circles of tiny air blasts and ripples. The dozens of fireballs were shattered by Wu Qi's punches. Large sheets of blood-red flame poured down from the sky, sticking to the ground around Wu Qi, burning the ground and causing it to sink. A shallow layer of lava rose and formed tiny bubbles on the ground. Raising his head and looking at Yusu, who was standing on the cloud with his eyes wide open and mouth agape, Wu Qi stepped on the cloud and flew up into the sky. The acquired pearls of earth and wood element wheeled slowly around him for a while, then he opened his mouth and swallowed them into his stomach. Holding the long spear made of white wax in his hand, Wu Qi sneered at Yusu and said, "What other tricks do you have? Let's see if you are going to avenge your bastard son, or if I'm going to crush your head today." Glancing at Lao Ai, Yan Xianchen, and the others, Wu Qi sighed lightly and said, "Don't always find trouble with me in the future, or you will get yourself killed." Lao Ai and Yan Xianchen's faces fell instantly. They recalled what Wu Qi had just said. How could Wu Qi know about the secret meeting between Yan Xianchen and Yusu in the backyard of Yu Mansion? If Wu Qi did not expose the secret agreement between them, Wu Qi's threat would just be a joke. But, when Wu Qi exposed the two conditions of cooperation between Yusu and Yan Xianchen in front of so many people, his threat had become a great deterrent. Sitting on the reviewing platform, Yan Dan suddenly laughed and said, "This little fellow has made a fast progress. It looks like we have to treat him seriously as the Duke of Tianyun of Great Yan Dynasty, and not treat him as a little rascal from the countryside, fooling around with him." Sighing lightly, Yan Dan murmured to himself, "I wonder if he knows that Yan Dan is using him as a distraction, which has brought him so many troubles. If he knows that, and Yan Dan wants to subdue him, making him a loyal minister of Great Yan Dynasty, what should he do?" Mod and Su Qin turned to look at Yan Dan at the same time, and both of them teased at the same time, "Easy, just marry Zhang Le to him." Suddenly, Yan Dan's expression turned strange. He gave Mod and Su Qin a helpless look, smiled bitterly and said, "As for this, Yan Dan can't say for sure, and I can't do it. Firstly, it depends on Zhang Li's own opinion, and secondly, it depends on Prince Qi's opinion." Shaking his head, Yan Dan murmured under his breath, "I've chopped off the heads of 7 clan leaders, and all 8 princes have their own thoughts. I can't force the crown prince to go against me, or else, this great Yan dynasty will really fall apart." The three of them turned to look at Wu Qi and Yusu, who were hovering above the drill ground, and sighed lightly at the same time. After a while, Su Qin sighed and said, "Since the ancient times, there has never been an immortal king. When the king of a dynasty can truly live forever, no matter how filial his descendants are, they will be forced to have other thoughts. Difficult, difficult, difficult. Even we can't come up with any good ideas. We have never encountered such a thing. What should we do? What should we do? We can't just kill all the members of Great Yan Imperial Clan, can we?" Upon hearing Su Qin's words, Yan Dan couldn't care less about his and Su Qin's identity, and spat at Su Qin's face. Bah! Mod laughed, shook his head, sighed and said, "Fortunately, Ingzheng is here. Daqin is here." With such a formidable enemy eyeing covetously from the side, the restless people in Great Yan Dynasty should be able to calm down now, right? Wu Qi will no longer be the unlucky guy who has to take the blame. Speaking of which, as the king of a dynasty, Yan Dan has to borrow the name of Wu Qi to do something when he wants to clean up the imperial court. That is indeed a depressing thing. Yan Dan had a tangled expression on his face, as if there were 700 to 800 hammers hammering on the vital parts of his lower body at the same time. At last, Yan Dan breathed out a long sigh and said, "I used to think that only by having more descendants can I have a foothold in this damned place. But little did I know that when I have too many descendants, the affairs of the family, the state, and the world, everything makes me sad." Sigh, fortunately, Ingzheng is here. I can't wait to thank him. When I kill Ingzheng in the future, I'll definitely give him a proper burial. Clanking noises kept coming from the sky. Holding the soft and light white wax spear in his hand, Wu Qi was engaged in a fierce fight with Yu Su, who had his armor broken and body stained with blood. The golden spear and the wooden spear kept clashing, but the result was that the golden spear was bounced back by the wooden spear over and over again. Wu Qi injected an enormous amount of energy into the spear, bringing up gusts of strong winds as he thrust it toward Yu Su's face. His strength was stronger than Yu Su, and his reflexes were faster than him. In the time it took Yu Su to thrust out his spear once, Wu Qi had already thrust out 18 times, and every single one of them was aimed at Yu Su's vital parts. Yu Su, who was dizzy from all the attacks, had long lost his composure. He could only passively swing his golden spear around, trying to ward off Wu Qi's attacks. Two loud clangs rang out, as the golden spear was once again swept away by Wu Qi, and the tip of the spear pierced into Yu Su's lower abdomen, leaving 2 tiny bloody holes. On the drill ground, Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, and a few others had already risen to their feet, looking excitedly at Wu Qi, who now had the upper hand in all aspects. On the other hand, those nobles and ministers who were betting with them were sitting on their seats, unable to move, as if their parents had just passed away. Qin Wuyang, who was betting with Jing Ke, had his fists clenched so tightly that it seemed as if fire could burst out from the gaps between his fingers. He glared at Yu Su, who had fallen into a passive position, and scolded under his breath, "Trash." All of a sudden, a large black iron will flew out from behind Wu Qi's back. Clang! A loud clanging noise rang out, as the 8 feet and 1 inch wide iron will disintegrated into several thousand extremely thin, palm-sized iron wheels that shot whistling out. Sharp teeth were attached to these iron wheels, and amidst the whistling noises of wind tearing, the thousands of iron wheels enveloped Yu Su's body in just a blink of an eye. Blood and flesh splashed in all directions, while Yu Su flew out from within the countless iron wheels while howling miserably. At least 20 to 30 kilograms of muscles on his body were crushed by the iron wheels, exposing his pale white bones in many parts of his body. If not for the 6 palm-sized, round golden shields shooting out from his body, spreading out into a layer of golden light and protecting him, Yu Su would have long been ripped to shreds by these countless iron wheels. 1,000 blades will from Imo sect. Yu Su roared wildly, furiously turning his head to look at Mod, who stood beside Yan Dan. Mod's eyelids drooped as he took a deep breath. He murmured under his breath, "Jing Ke is Mod's in-name disciple. Yue is not him." Severely wounded, Yu Su roared out in a nearly insane manner, "Wu Qi, how dare you hurt me? Now die." With a flip of his right hand, Yu Su pulled out a seal made of platinum, carved into a vivid image of a white tiger and then shrouded in a dense gold element energy. He coughed a mouthful of blood onto the seal, and was about to activate the restrictive spell on it. But suddenly, 2 pearls shot out from Wu Qi's mouth. The full-force attack from the pearls of earth and wood element shattered all 6 golden shields on Yu Su's body, turning him into nothingness. Grabbing the white tiger seal in his hand, Wu Qi shook his head inwardly. It was already so difficult to kill Yu Su, let alone putting on a show. As there were too many experts around the drill ground, if not for the fear of being discovered, Wu Qi would have long killed Yu Su with a casual strike. Slowly descending the cloud, Wu Qi turned his head and looked at Jing Ku, who was standing on the east platform. Chief General, since you've won so much, is Wu Qi going to get a share? Jing Ku suddenly burst into a loud laughter. Chapter 202. The scene of Wu Qi killing Yu Su, the son of Yu Yi, filled the drill ground with a dead silence. The mighty overall strength he had shown had even raised the eyebrows of everyone. Apart from Yan Dan and a few others who knew the origin of his Jin Dan realm cultivation base, the rest of the nobles were whispering to each other, discussing how Wu Qi, a mere Xiantian Daoist, could suddenly possess the overall strength of Jin Dan realm. Some well-informed people even linked the overall strength of Wu Qi's Jin Dan realm cultivation base with the thunderbolts that suddenly struck Zhang Park. They believed that Wu Qi had transcended the thunder tribulation in Zhang Park and formed the Jin Dan realm. While all the nobles and ministers of Great Yan Dynasty were busy exchanging all kinds of information, Yan Dan's voice echoed through the drill ground, "Lao Ai, I can confer you the title of king. If you have the guts, why don't you follow Yan Dan to the inner palace and have a detailed discussion? Since Wu Qi has won, not only have you lost a huge bet, before Yingzheng is killed, you, Lao Ai, will also be Jin Dan's man." Lao Ai, whose face was unsightly because of Wu Qi's victory, suddenly threw his head back and laughed wildly. "Don't have the guts to go? Lao Ai, are you really that timid? Fine, so what if Lao Ai is your man before Yingzheng is killed?" Hee hee. After laughing evilly in a strange tone for a while, Lao Ai pointed his finger at Wu Qi and said coldly, "Kid, you are not bad. I just can't see through you in the imperial court of Great Yan Dynasty." Interesting. Holding the spear with both hands, Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to Lao Ai. "You flatter me, Prince of Changxin. In the future, I'll be your minister, and I hope Prince of Changxin can take good care of me." He paused for a brief moment, then grinned coldly and said, "Wu Qi's body is weak, and I can't withstand the torrential storm. If Prince of Changxin wants to deal with someone in the future, please don't find trouble with Wu Qi, or it will not be good for Wu Qi, and it will not be good for you either." Lao Ai narrowed his eyes, his face darkening as he cried out furiously, "Are you threatening me?" Wu Qi sneered and said, "Yes. I'm threatening you." Lao Ai turned to look at Yan Dan and grinned, "Look, Yan Dan, is this kid threatening me?" Yan Dan glanced coldly at Lao Ai and said in a low voice, "Tonight is a grand banquet in the imperial palace. All the civil and military officials of the imperial court and all the ministers of the imperial clan must attend it. Except for the generals who are leading the army, those who are absent will be punished with the crime of great disrespect. According to the decree of alchemy, Yu Su's remains were to be collected and buried with the honors of a marquis. While you're at it, confer Lao Ai the title of Prince of Changxin of Great Yan Dynasty, ranking above all the other kings. Although he has the title of nobility, he won't have any land." After letting out 3 loud laughs, Yan Dan extended his hand toward the palace and gestured, "Prince of Changxin, please. Lao Ai was indeed a peerless evil man. He did not take the conflict between him and Wu Qi to heart, but just threw his head back and laughed wildly into the sky. His long hair fluttered rapidly in the cold wind, and his eyes shone with an evil gleam. Abruptly, he transformed into a wild gust of wind and sped towards Yan Dan. While he was still in midair, Lao Ai had already thrust his fist forcefully towards Yan Dan. Yan Dan let out a wild laugh as well. All of a sudden, a grayish-white airflow rose from his back, as he too raised his right fist and thrust it towards Lao Ai. Both fists collided soundlessly. Yan Dan and Chi-Chi were knocked flying back while coughing blood. Their clothes were ripped apart at the same time, and the skin on their right fists was ripped to shreds. Both fists were dripping with blood, looking like 2 bloody gourds. Both men exchanged a glance, laughed wildly once again, then flew back into the imperial palace hand in hand. Wu Qi crossed his arms before his chest, tilted his head and looked at Yan Dan and Lao Ai, who were flying far away. He murmured under his breath, "What an ambiguous behavior these 2 men have. TSK, Could it be that they have the hobbies of men? Suddenly, a gentle and elegant voice with a tinge of mystery was heard. His Majesty does not have those hobbies. Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi, congratulations on getting such a great reward for you. In a short period of time, no one in the imperial court will dare to offend you. Su Qin has prepared some fine wine and some appetizers for you today. I wonder if I can have the honor. Wu Qi was taken aback. He quickly turned his head, and sure enough, it was Su Qin and Mod who were standing behind him. Laughing dryly, Wu Qi quickly cupped his fist and said, "Since Senior has invited me, Wu Qi dares not to decline." Please wait for a moment. Turning, Wu Qi turned to Jing Ku, who had transformed into a white beam and was flying over his head, heading towards the inner palace. "Chief General, since you've won so many things today, you have to share them with me. Or else, I'll tell all the civil and military officials in Great Yan Dynasty that it was you who helped me cheat, allowing me to forcefully form Jin Dan, which gave me the overall strength to control the acquired spirit pearls and kill Yu Su. It was you who ordered me to kill Yu Su." Wu Qi's voice was loud and clear, and everyone in the drill ground could hear it loud and clear. Many influential members of the nobility trembled, nodding their heads thoughtfully and exchanging glances with each other. Just as they had expected, just as they had expected. If not for the support from Chief General Jing Ku, how could Wu Qi, a young lad who had just sneaked into Great Yan Dynasty, have the courage to compete with the people from Yu Clan? TSK, Chief General Jing Ku had ordered the murderer to kill the youngest son of General Yu Yi. Even those influential members of the nobility who had just lost all their belongings were excited. This news was too sensational. The white beam of light transformed from Jing Ku nearly fell down from the sky. A gloomy curse was heard coming down from the sky. Along the way, Jing Ku kept murmuring something and flew straight into the inner palace. Su Qin and Mod stared at Wu Qi, unable to say a word for a long while. When Wu Qi turned his head back excitedly, Mod shook his head and said, "You little rascal. It was supposed to be a peaceful affair, but you just had to mess it up. After being yelled at by you, it is impossible for Yui not to fight with Jing Ku. Don't look for me for these troublesome matters, don't look for me." With a wave of his sleeve, Mod disappeared soundlessly from where he stood, not emitting even the slightest ripple of energy. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. Mod's cultivation base had actually reached such a level. It was not something that could be seen during normal times. At this moment, Princess Zhanglu had brought a large group of guards and rushed over excitedly. From a distance, she sprung into the air and hugged Wu Qi's arm. Meanwhile, Su Qin smiled at Princess Zhanglu, shook his head and said, "Princess, I've decided on Duke of Tianyun. He wants to accompany me to my mansion for a talk." "I'm sorry, Duke of Tianyun can't accompany Princess today. There will be a palace banquet in the evening, and Princess can still meet Duke of Tianyun at that time." Su Qin let out a loud laugh, grabbed Wu Qi's shoulder, and with a blink of his body, he brought Wu Qi to the palace gate. Wu Qi had no idea how Su Qin brought him away, while Princess Zhanglu was staring blankly at Wu Qi, who had suddenly disappeared from her arms. Suddenly, she stamped her feet and murmured, old man Su, next time I'll burn down your cottage. You old fool, you only know how to bully the younger generation. Next time I'll bring Su Xiaosu to a brothel and ask her to sing a little song. Let's see if your heart aches for your little granddaughter." Outside the palace gate, Wu Qi took over a black cloak handed to him by Su Qin. With a pat from Su Qin, the armor on his body fell gently to the ground. Both of them put on the black cloak, treading on the thick snow and walking along the street, looking like two commoners at the lowest level of Great Yan Dynasty. Both of them walked at an incredible speed, and in just a short while, they had left Ji City and arrived at the outskirts of the city. The outskirts of Ji City was a boundless snowfield that stretched as far as the eyes could see. Both of them walked along the path that was trodden by pedestrians, carriages, and horses. After walking for 15 minutes, they finally came to a small village. A few stray dogs were running back and forth at the entrance of the village, as if they wanted to enter the village to look for food, but dared not to do so. Su Qin grinned, rolled up his sleeves, grabbed a bullthick broken twig from the ground, and tiptoed behind the few stray dogs. Abruptly, he wielded the twig and smashed a black stray dog with a heavy blow. The dog let out a loud howl, then fell to the ground with white foam coming out from its mouth. Su Qin tossed the branch away and grabbed the skin of the stray dog. He let out a long laugh and said, "A delicacy for a guest, what a great favor." The corner of Wu Qi's mouth twitched when he saw that. Subconsciously, he shook his head. He walked forward, took over the stray dog from Su Qin's hand, smiled and asked, "Old mister, do you like this kind of food?" Su Qin turned his head and gave Wu Qi a look, then said, "Don't tell me, what kind of food do you think Su Qin likes? Do I need a few hundred servants to serve me for every meal, and a couple dozens of serving maids to serve me fine wine and delicacies?" Shaking his head, Su Qin smiled and said, "I used to be like that. But now, after living for so many years, I'm getting tired of living. Instead, I've recalled this hobby of mine when I was a teenager." Patting on the black dog in Wu Qi's arms, Su Qin breathed out a long sigh and said, "Over 2,000 years old, damn it, I'm really old." Su Qin chuckled, shook his head, clasped his hands behind his back, and slowly walked into the village. This was an ordinary little village. There were about 500 to 600 households in the village, and all of them were ordinary farmers. Wu Qi's divine sense swept across the people he met on the road. They were all ordinary people. These people seemed to be very familiar with Su Qin. When they saw him, they all smiled and bowed to Su Qin. "Greetings, old master. Have you eaten?" It could be seen that Su Qin was very popular in the village, and no one seemed to know what role he played in the imperial court of the Daqin dynasty. As Su Qin walked, he greeted the villagers and said to Wu Qi with a smile, "I'm not used to living in a luxurious mansion. In the last 300 years, I like to live in the village outside the city. On weekdays, I grow my own vegetables, raise pigs, and when I have nothing to do, I catch a few stray dogs and stew them. I also teach my youngest son and granddaughter. It's a happy life." With a smile, Su Qin said mischievously, "I'm really poor and bored. There are 2 widows in the village. They are born with tender skin, and I peep at them bathing in the middle of the night. It's really beautiful." Wu Qi felt his hands tremble. He really couldn't describe Su Qin's behavior. He laughed dryly for a while, then murmured in a low voice, "Old mister has the heart of a child, and this, naive and unaffected. It's really unique taste." Su Qin laughed proudly and led Wu Qi to a yard at the end of the only dirt road in the village. The yard covered an area of about 7 or 8 acres. In front of the house was a flower garden. At the moment, the branches were withered, and there were no flowers at all. Behind the house were a few acres of vegetable fields. There were still some green vegetables that hadn't been harvested yet. They were lying in a mess on the vegetable fields, smashed by the heavy snow. On the left side of the house was a pigsty. A few pigs that were as skinny as monkeys were weakly snorting on the ground. One of the pigs was so hungry that it was gnawing on the wooden fence of the pigsty, letting out a creaking noise. On the right side of the house was a barn. 3 horses, which should be used as mounts, were lying on the ground with their eyes wide open, waiting for death. Judging from the looks of these 3 horses, they hadn't eaten anything for about half a month. They were so hungry that even their skins were drooping. When they saw Su Qin walk into the yard, the 3 horses and the few pigs struggled hard at the same time, then weakly howled a few times at Su Qin. Su Qin stared at these livestock in astonishment. He sighed and said, "I've only been away for a little over a month. How did all of you end up like this? Zhang Yi, you bastard. I asked you to help me feed the livestock. Why are there 3 less pigs and 2 less horses?" A large piece of pig shoulder blade was thrown out from the house. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes and walked out from the house listlessly. "What are they called?" 3 pigs and 2 horses, they've all been eaten within this 1 month. There's a black dog. Li Xian, come out and wash them. Hurry up and stew them. It's not easy for us to come to Great Yan Dynasty. Let's eat a few more livestock. We can consider it as serving Daqin, and severely weakening the national strength of Great Yan Dynasty. Zhang Yi smiled and narrowed his eyes into 2 fine lines. If we eat 1 more livestock, when the war breaks out in the future, the soldiers of Great Yan Dynasty will have 1 less meal to eat. Li Xian answered and walked out from the house. While walking, he was picking his teeth with a dagger. Wu Qi loosened his grip, and the fainted wild dog fell heavily to the ground. So, this was Su Qin's mansion. Chapter 203. When he saw Zhang Yi and Li Xian, Wu Qi instinctively touched the spirit-breeding ring on his finger. All his magical treasures and flying swords, including the various talismans in the ring, were ready to be unleashed. Fortunately, he had fed 100 long-bow men the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup, allowing them to form the Jin Dan. Even if Zhang Yi and Li Xian were here, Wu Qi had the confidence to trap them with a formation formed by 100 long-bow men. Together with the acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements and all other magical treasures, Wu Qi had the confidence to kill any one of them with a surprise attack. With the confidence in his heart, Wu Qi didn't do anything out of line. He just watched as Li Xian strode towards him, picked up the black dog, and strode to the back of the house. Very soon, the miserable howl of the black dog before its death was heard coming from the back of the house. When Li Xian was doing all this, he didn't even look at Wu Qi. Wu Qi, on the other hand, was staring at Zhang Yi with a straight face. He didn't give Li Xian a second glance either. Instead, he cupped his fist and bowed to Zhang Yi, Jr., Duke of Tianyun of Great Yan Dynasty. Zhang Yi offers greetings to old Mr. Zhang Yi. I wonder if old Mr. is here to rob something, or to kidnap Princess Zhang Lu and offer her to Yingzheng. Let old Mr. know that this is Ji City, and old Mr. is getting on in years. If you are not careful, you might lose an arm or a leg. Zhang Yi could not help but laugh. Meanwhile, Su Qin gave Wu Qi a slap and said with a smile, "All right. Come in, they are not here to cause any trouble." Taking off the cloak, Su Qin brought Wu Qi and walked into the house. Su Qin's house looked like an ordinary house in the countryside. It was spacious and empty, without any furnishings. A fire pit was dug right in the middle of the house, and a good charcoal fire was lit in it. A few pieces of animal skins were spread on the ground, and 2 long narrow tables were placed on top of them. The paint on the tables was almost gone. On the back of the house, a few ancestral tablets were placed. But Su Qin's ancestors must have been starving, just like the pigs in his pigsty and the horses in the stable. In the porcelain plate in front of the ancestral tablets, there were only a few moldy and hairy fruit cores. There were a few teeth marks on them. It was obvious that the flesh had been bitten off by mice. The small bronze incense burner next to the porcelain plate was empty, without the slightest bit of incense ash. Presumably, Su Qin had not offered incense to his ancestors for 70 or 80 years. In the corner of the house, there was a messy pile of farm tools. Looking at the rusty appearance of the farm tools, they had not been used for at least 30 to 50 years. Next to the farming tools were several large wicker baskets filled with grains. Wu Qi's eyes were sharp. He saw that the grains were also covered with mouse droppings. Presumably, when the mice were eating in the basket, Su Qin was too lazy to get up and drive them away. The 3 of them knelt next to the fire pit. Su Qin flipped his hand and took out a set of azure-colored fine porcelain tea set from his sleeve. It was speckled with sea blue rain marks. He slowly started to boil water and make tea with the charcoal fire in the fire pit. The water was the supreme-grade spring water from a fine porcelain water jar from under Su Qin's sleeve, and the tea was the supreme-grade tribute tea from a crystal tea jar from under his sleeve. Together with Su Qin's over 2,000 years of tea-making skills, it did not take long for a refreshing aroma of tea to envelop the entire courtyard. Su Qin smiled complacently, then said, "This is the supreme grade tribute tea." Years ago, for the sake of this tribute tea, I mobilized 3 million Great Yen Navy soldiers and sailed 20,000 miles across the Great Eastern Ocean to attack the Kingdom of Feathermen. It took me 3 years to conquer their 738 cities, and forced them to offer me 50 kilograms of this supreme grade spirit tea every 10 years. Su Qin breathed out a long sigh, then continued proudly, "This tea only grows in the third heaven abyss of the Kingdom of Feathermen, on the cliffs 80 miles above the ground. It is soaked by the strong wind and rain at high altitudes, and that's how this excellent tea is produced. Only the buds taken from the tongue of virgins under the age of 14 in the Kingdom of Feathermen, who have spirit roots, can be made into this wonderful tea. Come, give it a try." Wu Qi took over the teacup handed over by Su Qin and placed it on the table in front of him. He looked at Su Qin, smiled and said, "Kid, you don't like to drink other people's saliva." Su Qin, who was pouring the tea into his mouth, was taken aback, then choked on the tea. After a violent cough, Su Qin threw the tea set out of the door. He stared at Wu Qi and said angrily, "You bastard. What you said has completely ruined this tea." Zhang Yi smiled and also took out a tea set from his sleeve. What he took out was a fine blue porcelain tea set made from sky after rain. It was also a water jar filled with top-grade mountain spring water. He slowly made tea. As he worked, he smiled and said, "This tea is also the tribute tea of the Daqin. The tea is fragrant and can greatly replenish vitality. Only on the battlefield where millions of people have been killed and the blood-fiendish battle energy gathered can such good tea be nourished. The people who pick the tea are not those delicate little women. They must be elite warriors with strong vitality. Only the tea picked can strengthen vitality, nourish vitality, strengthen muscles and bones, and replenish bone marrow." Su Qin turned his head to look at Wu Qi and said coldly, "This imperial preceptor of the Daqin dynasty is showing off in front of us. What do you have to say about this tea?" After a moment of silence, Wu Qi said with drooping eyelids, "Burning the zither and boiling the crane, it really spoils the mood. This kid doesn't have the heart to say it." Su Qin angrily smashed the table next to him. He said angrily, "You've already burned my crane, so you have to stew Zhang Yi's crane for me." Zhang Yi looked up at the sky and laughed. "But my crane is not afraid of you. Stew it. How are you going to stew this kind of ling tea nourished by the blood energy of the battlefield?" Looking at the proud Zhang Yi, Wu Qi said lightly, "Only on the battlefield where millions are killed can this ling tea take root and grow. But after killing millions, before people die, their feces and urine will flow, and the ground will be covered in feces and urine. Is it the blood energy of the people that nourishes this ling tea, or is it the ling tea that absorbs the smell of feces and urine to form this ling tea? No one knows. Wu Qi is not willing to drink urine." Silence. Su Qin put his hands under his sleeves, raised his head and looked at the ceiling, falling into a gloomy silence. Zhang Yi's face twisted, his mouth twitching as he stared at Wu Qi. After a full quarter of an hour, he slowly picked up all the tea sets and threw them out of the room. Trembling, he looked at Wu Qi, snorted coldly and said, "Burning the zither and boiling the crane, there is no one better than you who spoils the mood under the heaven. You little brat, with just a few words, you have destroyed 2 magical items in the world. You. Wu Qi sighed lightly. From the black dragon spirit ring, he fished out 3 wine jars made of black clay and handed one to each of the 2 old men. Opening the jar and taking 2 mouthfuls of the wine, Wu Qi shook his head and said, "I destroyed these 2 magical items." You've been drinking them for over 1,000 years, 2,000 years, so what if you keep drinking them? It's just that you can't stand the devil in your heart." After taking a few mouthfuls of wine, Wu Qi stared at Zhang Yi, sneered, and said, "All right, old Mr. Zhang Yi, what are you doing here? That day, I saw you and old Mr. Su Qin fighting so fiercely. How can you sit here and laugh with each other?" "Su Qin and Zhang Yi are talking and laughing with each other, that is because we are from the same sect. That day, we schemed against each other and wounded each other, that is because we are serving different masters. Personal friendship is personal friendship, and official business is official business. You can't mix them together. After that day, Zhang Yi came to me and asked me to bring you here to discuss something with you. That's why I found the opportunity to bring you here today. Clapping his hands, Su Qin clarified his relationship with Zhang Yi with a few words, I'm just a pimp. If you have any deal, just tell me. The sound of footsteps was heard, as Li Xian walked into the room, carrying a large clay pot. Inside the pot was Chi-Chi's black dog meat. He placed the pot on top of a charcoal fire. The fire was strong, and soon, the cold water in the pot was steaming. Li Xian gave Wu Qi a look, stretched out his hand and said, Young lad, I remember you. I didn't kill you with 3 arrows, but you're really shameless. How could you use the man you saved as a shield? If you were a soldier of Daqin, you would have been punished by military law. He snorted coldly, then shouted, I have wine, bring it to me. From his storage ring, Wu Qi pulled out a few urns of wine and placed them next to the fireplace, letting the charcoal fire slowly heat up the wine. Li Xian had already picked up a urn of wine and started gulping it down, not giving Wu Qi another look. Zhang Yi coughed lightly and said slowly, Wu Qi, the purpose of sneaking into Ji City this time is to find out the general strength of Great Yan Dynasty. This is just a mission that is convenient for us. Our other important task is to... Zhang Yi threw a glance at the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, one of the 2 rings on Wu Qi's finger. Currently, Wu Qi was only wearing the Black Dragon Spirit Ring and the Spirit Breeding Ring. All the miscellaneous treasures he had were kept in the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, which contained all his wealth. Upon seeing the strange look in Zhang Yi's eyes, Wu Qi quickly covered the ring with his hand and said with a sneer, What I have now is mine. Even if Ingzhen wants to take it back, it is impossible. If he wants the ring back, he will have to come and get it himself. Zhang Yi kept shaking his head and said, You can't. His Majesty is severely wounded, and is now recuperating in the palace. In the future, he will bring an army to Ji City, and at that time, he will settle the score with you. The reason why I'm here today is to take back a lacquer box inlaid with gold from the ring. Wu Qi quickly scanned the Black Dragon Spirit Ring with his divine will. Without needing Wu Qi to search for the item spirit, the Black Dragon item spirit had spat out the small lacquer box, measuring about 2 feet in length and width and 1 foot in height. It was an exquisite and luxurious lacquer box inlaid with gold. Wu Qi placed the box on the ground before him, pressed one of his hands on its surface, looked at Zhang Yi, smiled and said, This is the box, right? Tell me, what is inside? Zhang Yi gave the box a deep look, then said in an indifferent tone, It is the belongings left behind by His Majesty and the Empress. Some jewelry, a few pieces of clothing, and a personal letter left behind by the Empress to His Majesty many years ago. He sent his divine will into the box, and sure enough, they were all ordinary items that did not possess any natural energy. No wonder Wu Qi didn't notice this box when he was sorting through the Black Dragon Spirit Ring. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi said in an indifferent tone, For this box, Ingzhen has sent Imperial Advisor Daqin to Ji City to take the risk? Zhang Yi laughed dryly, nodded his head and said, This box is more important than my head. Of course, with Senior Marshal Brother Su Qin here, although this trip is a little dangerous, I will only suffer some serious injuries at most, and will not be killed. Once again, Su Qin tried to distance himself from Zhang Yi and said, It's not that I don't want to kill you. Even if the current emperor of Great Yan Dynasty sees you, he will only capture you alive, and won't kill you. Hee, public affairs are public affairs, and private affairs are private affairs. I, Su Qin, have never mixed public affairs and private affairs together. Lightly patting on the box, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, I don't care about your private relations. If you want this box, you'll have to pay me back with benefits. After a brief pause, Wu Qi looked at Zhang Yi with surprise and asked, Speaking of which, as the Emperor of Daqin, his territory is no smaller than Great Yan Dynasty, and he can have as many women as he wants. So, why is the belongings left behind by the Empress so precious? Su Qin remained silent, and he too, looked at Zhang Yi curiously. Zhang Yi pondered for a brief moment, then slowly began to speak. Chapter 204. The fire was burning vigorously, and the soup in the pot was boiling, causing the meat of the black dog to roll and writhe in the boiling water. A strong aroma was emanating from the pot. Li Exan licked his lips and carefully tended to the fire. Every now and then, he would take a deep breath and look like he was drooling. The sound of boiling water kept coming from the pot, while large sheets of snowflakes were falling from the outside of the house, landing on the ground and the roof, producing rustling noises. The crowing of cocks and barking of dogs could be heard coming from afar, as well as the greetings of the villagers. It made the house even quieter, and made Zhang Yi's voice sound even more ancient, as if an old ghost who had been dead for several thousand years was talking nonsense. Wu Qi knew the background of Yan Dan, Ying Zheng, and the others. But both Su Qin and Zhang Yi thought that Wu Qi did not know the background of Yan Dan, Ying Zheng, and themselves. Therefore, they omitted many key points in their narration. However, according to the information he knew, Wu Qi had filled in some key details, and had roughly restored the original appearance of the incident. According to Zhang Yi, Ying Zheng had a beloved empress, who was the only woman he loved deeply in his life. This woman held a very important place in his heart. Therefore, after the death of the empress, or rather, after her disappearance, Ying Zheng missed her deeply, and brought her belongings with him. He often took them out to reminisce about her. The belongings in this chest had become a kind of spiritual sustenance for Ying Zheng. Ying Zheng always wore 2 rings on his finger. One was the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, which stored some of his personal belongings. The other was the White Dragon Spirit Ring, a very powerful spirit item, possessing the power to fight against nascent soul and deity transformation experts. During the battle in Meng Mountains, Wu Qi casually took a ring from Ying Zheng, and it happened to be the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, which stored all of Ying Zheng's personal belongings. Ying Zheng owned the entire Daqin dynasty, and although those treasures in the Black Dragon Spirit Ring were precious, he did not care about them. However, the belongings of Ying Zheng's empress were very important to him, and he was willing to pay a high price to retrieve them. On the other hand, Wu Qi's version was much more detailed. As Zhang Yi did not know Wu Qi's background, he had no idea that Wu Qi came from the same place as them. Therefore, although his words were cautious, he was very cautious. However, with Su Qin sighing with him, there were some flaws in his words and some inconspicuous information was leaked. This was enough for Wu Qi to restore the original appearance of the matter. It was the time when Ying Zheng was a hostage in his youth. At that time, Ying Zheng was in dire straits and was constantly bullied and humiliated. That was when he met his future empress. At that time, Ying Zheng was just an ordinary teenager, and the feelings of a teenager were the most sincere. When he was in dire straits, the care and concern of a young girl was enough to make Ying Zheng remember it for the rest of his life. On top of that, Ying Zheng would become an emperor with great talent and bold vision in the future. Not many people could leave a mark on a peerless emperor like him, but once they did, it would be an unforgettable memory. If not for Su Qin sighing with emotion at the hardship of Ying Zheng's youth, Wu Qi would not know that the empress mentioned by Zhang Yi was someone Ying Zheng knew since he was a child. According to the historical records that Wu Qi knew, Ying Zheng was a hostage at that time, and it was a very difficult period. Later on, the girl had been accompanying Ying Zheng, accompanying him back to Qin state, inheriting the throne and seizing the power of Qin state. Initially, Zhang Yi wanted to skip this period of history with just one sentence, but Su Qin was too talkative and began to discuss with Zhang Yi about Ying Zheng's gains and losses during this period. Both of them talked in a very vague way, and if they were people born and raised in this world, they would be fooled by them. But, who was Wu Qi? He came from Earth, and Lu Xiaobai knew about this period of history very well. Therefore, the conversation between the two was clearly heard by him. In the process of Ying Zheng taking over the state and seizing the power, Ying Zheng's empress played a very important role. It was she who persuaded all the important ministers of Qin state to support Ying Zheng, and it was she who personally got rid of those who plotted against Ying Zheng. She even helped Ying Zheng survive a few assassination attempts. Without her, Yingzheng would have long become a pile of meat paste, and he would not be the future emperor of Qin dynasty. For Yingzheng, this girl was not only his first love when he was young, but also his nanny, bodyguard, advisor, and almost an all-round talent. It was exactly because of her protection and help that Yingzheng managed to sit on the throne of Qin state with much difficulty. After that, it was also this girl who came up with a plan to lure and kill the rebellious Lao Ai, and forced Lu Buwei, who held the sole power in Qin state, to commit suicide. Because even Su Qin did not know about this period of history, Su Qin interjected very enthusiastically on the side, almost trying to get to the bottom of it in detail. Zhang Yi had no choice but to point out the key points in a very vague way. Therefore, when Su Qin knew the true face of this period of history, so did Wu Qi. In fact, Wu Qi knew more than Su Qin, because Su Qin lived in an era earlier than Yingzheng, and the historical materials he knew were not as good as Wu Qi. With the help of the Empress, Yingzheng smoothly took control of the Qin dynasty, and with the help of the Empress, he successfully unified the world and accomplished his great cause. After his success, Yingzheng conferred this girl the title of Empress of Daqin, and gave her the same power and status as Yingzheng. However, this girl was so mysterious, and her ambition was not to be a heavenly god. After assisting Yingzheng to unify the world, this girl wholeheartedly lived in seclusion, practicing the Tao of immortality. Finally, one night, during a thunderstorm, the woman left behind a handwritten letter and disappeared. Since then, Yingzheng's temperament had changed greatly. He began to get close to alchemists, practitioners, and wholeheartedly seek the Tao of immortality. He even sent Su Fu out to sea to search for the elixir of immortality, not for his own immortality, but to find his empress. Even when he traveled around the world, searching for immortals, conferring titles of dragon kings and immortal spirits, it was all for the sake of finding his empress. Because of the hopelessness of immortality, and the excessive longing in his heart, Yingzheng became more and more brutal in his later years. In just a short period of time, he completely wiped out the foundation of the Daqin dynasty. Su Qin looked up and sighed, sighing for Yingzheng. Wu Qi was also staring at Zhang Yi, dumbfounded. It turned out that Yingzheng, the mighty ruler of a dynasty, was actually a man of love. But, what kind of girl could make Yingzheng so infatuated, so unforgettable, and so unforgettable, even after 1,000 years? 2,000 years had passed, and Yingzheng still carried her relic with him, playing with it day and night. Because Wu Qi had stolen the relic, Yingzheng had even sent out his generals and the imperial advisor of Daqin from far away, just to get the chest back. 10 years of life and death, never thinking, never forgetting, 1,000 miles of lonely grave, no place to talk about desolation. Even if we meet, we should not know each other, a face covered with dust, hair like frost. Last night, a dream suddenly returned home, dressing up by the window, looking at each other without a word, only 1,000 lines of tears. Every year, at the place of heartbreak, on a bright moonlit night, on a short pine hill. Casually plagiarizing a poem of mourning for his dead wife, Wu Qi looked at the falling snow outside the window with a melancholy expression. On the other hand, Su Qin and Zhang Yi were struck dumb by Wu Qi's excellent poem. Both of them kept repeating this plagiarized poem over and over again, their eyes shining brightly. Even Li Xian was staring blankly at Wu Qi with a wine jar in his hand, completely forgetting about the fine wine in the jar. I never thought that His Majesty Yingzheng, a peerless heaven-chosen one I met in Meng Mountains, is actually such a man of love. Wu Qi admires you, said Wu Qi, raising up the wine jar and gulping down 2 mouthfuls of wine. Looking at Zhang Yi, who was still immersed in the poem, Wu Qi said seriously, I really admire the deep friendship between His Majesty Yingzheng and the Queen of Daqin. But, as the saying goes, friendship is friendship, and business is business. Although Wu Qi admires the deep friendship between His Majesty Yingzheng and the Queen of Daqin, it was not easy for me to steal this ring when I was surrounded and intercepted by Daqin's generals. Clearing his throat, Wu Qi shoved the box back into the black dragon spirit ring, then said in an unusually serious tone, without any benefits, even if old Mr. Su Qin can help me, it is impossible for me to hand over this box. Frankly speaking, since this is the relic of His Majesty Ying Zhang and the Queen, I think Wu Qi can give it to Princess Zhanglu as a precious gift. If His Majesty knows that Wu Qi has given the relic of His Majesty Ying Zhang and the Queen to his granddaughter, I believe he will be very happy. Perhaps, he will even give Wu Qi another promotion. Just a moment ago, Zhang Yi was still immersed in the melancholy poem, and when he heard Wu Qi's shameless words, he could not help but shiver. Aren't you afraid of Great Qin's revenge? He cried out furiously. Wu Qi rose to his feet, laughed out loud and said, I am, but this is the capital of Great Yan dynasty. Even if that old fool Ying Zhang is here, I'll still say the same thing. I can take back the relic of his wife, and I won't take advantage of a dead man. But, what about the benefits? Give me the benefits. Without any benefits, don't even think about taking away a single hair from me. Do you believe that if I give a loud shout, several hundred Earth Immortals in G City will rush out and chop you into meat paste? Li Xian had just risen to his feet with a ferocious gleam in his eyes, but when he heard Wu Qi's threat, he sat back down again. Su Qin laughed dryly and said, calm down, don't get angry. Junior brother, if you can take back the relic of Ying Zhang's wife, no, Empress Daqin, it will be a great achievement. Don't be too stingy. I can only keep you here for a few days, and that won't be a problem. If this little fellow really gives a loud shout and provokes those people in G City, I'll leave right away. Don't think that I'll be your scapegoat. Zhang Yi flew into a rage. He glared at Su Qin and said, what a disloyal man. We are still fellow disciples of the same sect. Su Qin was furious. He glared at Zhang Yi and snorted, how much is loyalty worth? If you're loyal enough, you shouldn't have eaten half a dog leg more than me in the back mountain when you were learning in the Ghost Valley. I'm the one who hunted that dog, so that half dog leg should belong to me. Zhang Yi said angrily, you still remember such a trivial matter? Do you remember that you still owe me 3 large sums of money? Su Qin answered without hesitation, I've forgotten. I only remember that you still owe me a pair of boots. Both men glared at each other, then cursed at the same time, what a shameless scum. Hastily, Wu Qi cried out, Hey! Hey! 2 old masters, slow down your petty business that has been going on for thousands of years. Tell me my condition first. If you don't give me enough benefits, I'll take this relic of Empress Daqin and give it away to someone else. It's fine if you don't want to give it to Princess Zhanglu, I'll give it to some girls in a brothel. Su Qin laughed wildly, while Zhang Yi roared furiously, how dare you? Little fellow, just you wait, Daqin will never let you go. I'm so mad at you. Well, here's the good thing, it's up to you. With a flip of his hand, a flying sword enshrouded in an immense cold air shot out from Zhang Yi's palm. 130 years ago, His Majesty led us to the great central ridge in the depths of Meng Mountains and discovered an immortal cave left behind by an immortal. From there, we found this lower-grade spirit item, the Snow Dragon Sword. Zhang Yi sneered and said, a lower-grade spirit item, have you ever heard of such a treasure? A lower-grade spirit item? Wu Qi burst into a loud laughter, damn it, do you really think I'm an idiot? During the Rare Treasures Conference, that treasure was the innate Earth Element Energy Essence, and I was planning to use it to craft a magical treasure. Do you really think I took it as the acquired Earth Element Energy Essence? Pooh! A lower-grade spirit item. Master Wu Qi even has an innate treasure, and you want to use a lower-grade spirit item to exchange for the relic of Ying Zhang's wife? Dream on. Turning around, Wu Qi kicked the door open and strode out. Zhang Yi was startled, then he shouted hastily. Chapter 205. Hold on. Lad, you do know how to recognize treasures. No wonder you swallowed the innate Earth Element Energy Essence, leaving no chance for anyone else. Zhang Yi stared at Wu Qi with a little anger. Grinning coldly, he said, good. Fortunately, His Majesty has prepared for this. Before leaving, His Majesty told me to kill you if I can, and it will be best if I can snatch back the Black Dragon's spirit ring. If I can't kill you, I'll use this precious treasure to exchange for the Empress' legacy. While grinning coldly, Zhang Yi flipped his hand, and an 8-colored beam shot out from his palm, falling abruptly into the middle of the room. A hazy and auspicious light enveloped the entire room, as a chariot pulled by 8 horses slowly emerged amidst the auspicious light. The chariot had a simple and elegant design, and its body was made of some unknown material that was neither gold, jade, iron, nor stone. However, it had a glossy appearance, and was faintly shining with all sorts of glows from the sun, the moon, and the stars. The 8 horses were only about 3 feet tall, and they looked like living creatures. They were galloping at top speed, looking extraordinary. The body of the chariot was simple and elegant, measuring about 6 feet in both width and length. A large canopy was placed on top of the chariot, with jade necklaces dangling down from it. Countless layers of auspicious lights were intertwined on the surface of the chariot, which contained countless restrictive spells. Looking at the chariot with naked eyes, one could see countless restrictive spells flashing and vanishing like a meteor shower. It made Wu Qi feel a sharp pain in his eyes, as he could not see how many restrictive spells there were in the chariot. A vast, ancient and dignified aura came rushing at his face, as if there was a mighty god standing before everyone, waiting for their worship. Vaguely, loud cheers could be heard coming from the chariot, as if millions of people were worshipping and cheering for the chariot. An enormous power of faith was coiling around the chariot. It was shockingly strong, and when Wu Qi's divine will touched it, he immediately had a terrible feeling that his soul was about to be crushed. Zhang Yi, what the hell are you doing? What is this thing? He was taken aback, and nearly cried out. This chariot was too shocking. Judging from its ancient appearance, its majestic aura, the auspicious light from the restrictions, the enormous willpower, and the indistinct cheers of the people, this should be an emperor's artifact of virtue. It was definitely an emperor's artifact of virtue, and it was definitely an ancient emperor who had incredible strength and had achieved immeasurable results of virtue. Zhang Yi sneered. He looked at Wu Qi and said, "This is the Mu King's chariot of 8 horses. Of course, you have no idea who Son of Heaven Mu is, and you have no idea what kind of extraordinary treasure the chariot of 8 horses is. In short, this was His Majesty's treasure of virtue. It possessed boundless might, and its speed was incomparably fast. There were very few people and things in this world that could catch up to this carriage. Are you going to exchange this treasure for the Empress relic?" Staring coldly at Wu Qi, Zhang Yi said coldly, "Shui Meng Jian, frankly speaking, if I want to deceive you, I will. If I can't, I will use this chariot of 8 horses to exchange for it. Since you are a knowledgeable man, you should know that this is an ancient emperor's item of virtue. Ha, compared to it, this lower-grade spirit item is nothing. Ha ha ha." Wu Qi looked greedily at the chariot of 8 horses. How could he not know about King Mu of Zhou, son of Heaven Mu? How could he not know about his 8 horses? He was the son of Heaven Mu, who once patrolled the lands to the west and met with the Queen Mother of the West, an ancient god. His chariot was pulled by 8 heavenly horses. The 8 horses were divided into 4 categories. 1 was a treacherous ground, never treading on the ground. 2 were flying feather, surpassing birds. 3 were running night, traveling tens of thousands of miles in the night. 4 were surpassing shadow, traveling under the sun. 5 were surpassing radiance, having a shiny coat. 6 were surpassing light, having 1 form and 10 forms. 7 were soaring mist, riding on clouds. And 8 were supporting wings, having a pair of fleshy wings. They were the famous divine mounts in history, and their names had been completely turned into myths and legends. The son of Heaven Mu, King Mu of Zhou, was also the emperor with the strongest and most mysterious divinity in history. The records and legends about him were just a myth, and not a historical biography. If this chariot of 8 horses was truly created by the son of Heaven Mu, then his myths and legends should be 99% true. Only an idiot would not trade for it. Look at its size, look at its shape, look at its luster. TSK, only an idiot would not trade for such a great treasure. Wu Qi laughed wildly, casually pulling out the box made of lacquer and throwing it over to him. After that, he impatiently kept the chariot into the black dragon's spirit ring. Needless to say, an item of virtue belonging to an ancient emperor would either possess the aura of the human emperor, or possess an unparalleled overall strength. Otherwise, no one would be able to control it. Wu Qi was just a commoner. He did possess the aura of a rascal, a thief, or a fugitive. However, as for the aura of the human emperor, it might not match with him even after 100 lifetimes. With his current cultivation base, he was not even a heaven immortal, let alone controlling an extraordinary treasure like this. Nevertheless, Wu Qi was not worried at all. If he could not even control an item of virtue, the scroll of stealing would not be the scroll of stealing. If it were some other powerful innate magical treasures or various immortal items, which could only be controlled by someone with a formidable overall strength, Wu Qi would not be able to do anything about it. However, although it looked like an item of virtue was the most difficult to control, it was actually the easiest to master. After keeping the chariot of 8 horses into the black dragon's spirit ring, Wu Qi was so happy that his eyes narrowed into 2 lines. Zhang Yi took over the box, gave Wu Qi a deep look, nodded his head and said, "All right, I'll leave the chariot of 8 horses to you. Take good care of it, along with the black dragon's spirit ring. When the mighty army of Daqin crushes Ji City, you'll have to hand them over to me. His Majesty has said that these treasures will only be temporarily kept in your hands. You're on your own now." Su Qin sneered and said, "Junior brother, you're looking down on your senior brother by saying that. Why don't you say that the mighty army of Great Yen crushes Xianying City?" Zhang Yi smiled, then turned to Su Qin and said, "Senior brother, why don't we make a bet?" Su Qin's interest was aroused. As he rubbed his palms together and was about to make a bet with Zhang Yi, Wu Qi suddenly said coldly, "When the mighty army of Daqin crushes Ji City, I'll definitely find a most remote and desolate place, deep in the mountains, and throw this black dragon spirit ring into it, making it stay in the world forever. After that, I'll immediately slit my own throat and reincarnate. Let's see if you can find the chariot of 8 horses or not." Zhang Yi was stunned, and so was Li Xian. Su Qin was struck dumb for a brief moment. Suddenly, he held his stomach and burst out into a wild laughter. "Junior brother, Zhang Yi, how could you forget that the most difficult people to deal with under the heaven are not the emperor, not the ministers, not the heroes, but the most difficult people to deal with are these little rascals? Ha ha ha, I suddenly have a premonition that Yingzheng will suffer a great loss in the hands of this little rascal. Do you believe me?" Zhang Yi twitched his lips and stormed out of the room while cursing, disappearing in just a blink of an eye. Li Xian was struck dumb for a moment, then he shook his head and gave the dog meat in the big clay pot a look with reluctance. After that, he hastily chased after Zhang Yi, transforming into a sword beam and flying away. Wu Qi and Su Qin looked at each other and smiled. Putting aside what happened just now, both of them squatted next to the fire pit, scooped up a piece of dog meat that was almost cooked, and began gnawing on it happily. The cold wind was whistling outside the room, but inside the room, it was steaming hot, and the aroma of meat was filling the air. There was also a delicious wine to accompany the meal. This was the joy of life. Neither of them cared about their seniority, and acted like a pair of scoundrel friends who had been together for many years. They drank and played with each other, and eventually finished the whole black dog meat to their heart's content. Su Qin's table manners were extremely unsightly. He even drank up all the soup in the pot, and nearly stuck out his tongue to lick the bottom of the pot. Li Xian, this little fellow, although he is not good at fighting, he is good at shooting arrows from the back. I never expected that dog meat can be cooked so well. Having eaten and drunk to his heart's content, Su Qin lied down on the leather bed without caring about his image, holding his belly and snorting. Wu Qi, on the other hand, was lying down on the leather bed with his legs crossed. He was humming a folk song, and complacently pondered over the story between Yingzheng and his empress. However, this leisurely mood was soon broken, as the sonorous ringing of golden bells and jade bells was heard coming from far away in Ji City. The banquet of Great Yan Imperial Palace had begun. Su Qin and Wu Qi had no choice but to hug their round bellies. Helplessly, they set up their sword beams in the backyard and sped into the city. Both of them were busy changing their clothes in midair, and when they arrived at the entrance of the imperial palace, they had already changed into the splendid imperial dress. Many nobles and ministers of Great Yan dynasty were lining up neatly and entering the imperial city. Su Qin and Wu Qi squeezed and squeezed through the crowd, and finally found their acquaintances. Shockingly, Su Qin was the best friend of a group of pedantic scholars from Great Yan dynasty's editorial institute. After he blended into the group of pedantic old men, he quickly became one of them. On the other side, Wu Qi found Lu Qingfeng. Both of them exchanged a glance, telling each other that everything was fine. After that, they followed the crowd and walked into the imperial palace. When Wu Qi attended the banquet for the first time, he entered the highest hall with the identity of Lu Qingfeng's attendant. But today, as a noble of Great Yan dynasty who also had the title of duke, Wu Qi was given a long narrow table right next to Lu Qingfeng. As Yan Dan and his company had not arrived yet, Wu Qi kept looking at the three-tiered dais at the far end of the hall. To his surprise, he saw 5 luxurious long narrow tables inlaid with gold and jade on top of the dais. Behind the tables were 2 large chairs made of white jade, covered with a thick layer of demon beast fur. Right next to Yan Dan's seat, there were a few other simple and unadorned long narrow tables placed in order. During the imperial banquet of Great Yan dynasty, all the guests, no matter it was the emperor or the others, would kneel behind the long narrow tables. This was the etiquette of Great Yan dynasty. However, the chairs behind these 5 long narrow tables were very different from the etiquette of Great Yan dynasty, and no one knew who they were prepared for. On the second tier of the dais, where there were only 5 people, including Jing Ku, were seated, but now, over 30 luxurious tables were added. A group of palace maids and eunuchs were bustling around these newly added tables. There were even a few strong and burly eunuchs, panting as they carried 2 slices of raw pig and lamb, carefully placing them on these tables. They were the raw pig and lamb, with fresh blood still dripping down from them. Wu Qi stared blankly at those large pieces of meat, and could not help but cry out in shock. Could it be that there are some people who eat raw meat and drink blood here today? How come even raw meat is served here? The rest of the people in the hall had also noticed that the situation on the dais was different today. Their eyes were filled with shock as they stared at these pieces of meat. A strange aura had enveloped the entire hall. Some of the influential members and ministers were glancing around anxiously, especially those ministers who made the bet with Jing Ku and Gao Jianli in the drill ground this morning. Their faces were filled with an aura of death, and their bodies were shivering. There were also some ministers who had a pitiful expression on their faces, looking at Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen, and the other 8 princes who sat at the front of all the ministers. However, Yan Xianchen himself had an unsightly expression on his face, so how could he pay any attention to these henchmen? The battle in the drill ground was just a bet, but it had thoroughly exposed the division of power in the imperial court of Great Yan dynasty. Many people had a premonition that a storm was coming. While Wu Qi was looking at these ministers, he suddenly saw Yu Wendi and Yu Qianqian sitting behind 2 tables that were placed next to each other, talking in a low voice with a strange smile on their faces. The smiles on their faces made Wu Qi feel very strange. Chapter 206. The second one was a skinny old man, He Qianqiu, the master of the immortal cliff of Meng Mountains. His territory was only 5 million miles wide, but most of the demons and devils in the immortal cliff were flying creatures, so half of the airspace of Meng Mountains was under the control of He Qianqiu's disciples and disciples. He Qianqiu had just broken through the realm of mid-stage nascent divinity, so his cultivation base was much weaker than Xiong Wanling. However, as a crane, he could fly in the air. Therefore, if they were to engage in a real battle, the result would be a draw. Wu Qi picked up the wine cup and took a sip without making a sound. The way the father and daughter addressed Yan Dan and his men was very interesting. They were addressing Yan Dan and his men by their name. Clearly, in their hearts, they did not take the emperor, crown prince, princess, and the others seriously. They were very confident, but where did they get this confidence from? Yu clan was just the chief editor of Great Yen Dynasty. Although it was a noble clan, it did not have any real power. The third one was a short and stout old man, Huo Wuyu. He had the bloodline of the bald owl, an ancient ferocious bird, and had a cultivation base close to peak stage nascent divinity realm. He was only slightly weaker than Wanying Dragon King of Longyuan River. Although he was short and stout, he had an amazing cultivation base. However, it was very difficult for the bald owl to mix with other rare birds. Therefore, Huo Wuyu was a loner without any offspring. However, he had taken in many ferocious birds, built the Thousand-Bone Cave, and occupied the other half of the airspace of Meng Mountains. In addition to these four strange-looking men, the last woman was not tall, not short, not fat, not thin, not fat, not thin. She was too fat, too thin, too thin. She walked like a weak willow in the wind, a fragrance wafting from her body. She smiled before she spoke, and was as beautiful as a young girl in a romantic dream. But, it was not right to call her a teenage girl. She had the body and appearance of a stunning beauty, but the charm she exuded was something even 1,000 experienced brothels could not compare to. Yen Dan gave the lady a helpless look, smiled bitterly and said, "Fox King, please spare Yen Dan's ministers. How could they withstand your mercy?" Suddenly, golden bells and jade chimes rang in unison, and the musicians on both sides of the main hall played drums. Accompanied by the vigorous and powerful court drum music, Yen Dan and his entourage, surrounded by many eunuchs and palace maids, strode out from the back of the hall. In the main hall, many nobles and officials knelt down to pay their respects to Chi-Chi, shouting, "Long live His Majesty." Yen Dan, whose face was glowing with health, seemed to be in high spirits. He raised his hands and said with a smile, "Gentlemen, please rise, rise. There's no need to be overly courteous." While chuckling, the woman abruptly opened her mouth and said, "People, is Su-mei, beautiful?" As soon as Yen Dan's words left his mouth, everyone's expression changed. The last man was 8 feet tall. He was even thinner than the Qin Qing Shui that Wu Qi had seen before. He was practically a human-shaped stick. His skin was purple-gold in color, and under his skin, there were faintly visible scales. His eyes were like those of a cat, narrowed into a thin line under the strong lamplight in the main hall, revealing the cold-blooded and merciless characteristic of cold-blooded animals. He never looked at anyone, but kept glancing at the wine utensils, silver, and all kinds of metal utensils in the main hall. He seemed to be drooling with greed. The fourth man was a skinny middle-aged man, a golden armor devourer, an ancient beast who cultivated into a human form. The golden armor devourer loved to eat all kinds of metals, and devoured the energies contained in them. His body was extremely tough. Although he had just broken through to the nascent divinity realm 1,300 years ago, with his incredibly strong fleshly body, he was able to fight against Wanying Dragon King, a peak-stage nascent divinity expert. He had the dominion of 50 million miles of forests and woods in Meng Mountains, and had built a great foundation in the bottomless dark abyss of Meng Mountains, with countless demons and devils serving under his command. After waiting for all the influential officials and ministers of Great Yen to pay their respects to Yen Dan once again, only then did Yen Dan smilingly introduce these 5 strange-looking men and women to the crowd. Right after the lady walked out from behind Ma Yi, her pink eyes, which were as deep as 2 pools of water, gave everyone a quick glance. Immediately, 99% of the few thousand influential officials and ministers of Great Yen Dynasty in the main hall lost their composure and fell to the ground with a thud. These people stared at the lady with an unbearable expression, while gulping and swallowing saliva. Some even had their lower bodies bulging, staring at her with eyes that seemed to be shooting flames. It looked like they could not wait to pounce on her, put their arms around her, and have sex with her on the spot. Wu Qi smiled and nodded at her, then turned to look at the rest of the people standing behind Yen Dan. After introducing these 5 formidable demons who occupied a region in Meng Mountains, Yan Dan smiled and said, 3 days ago, Yan Dan had burned the imperial decree and offered it to the heaven, worshipping 5 demon kings as the imperial advisors of great Yan dynasty. From now on, 5 demon kings are connected with the fate of great Yan dynasty. We will live or die together. The crown prince of great Yan dynasty, Yan Qijuan, the prime minister of Inner Palace, Ma Yi, and 12 inner ministers clad in the bright red robe of eunuchs. Apart from these people, there were also 5 extraordinary people, 4 men and 1 woman, who were dressed very differently from the people of great Yan dynasty. Their expressions were relaxed, and their aura was restrained within their bodies, not leaking out at all. Yet, they gave one a feeling that they were like nuclear warheads that could explode with a frightening lethality at any time. At this moment, both father and daughter were looking at the throne on the dais at the same time. Yu Qianqian murmured with a surprised tone, "This is strange. Apart from Yan Qijuan and Yan Zixuan, who else can sit side by side with Yan Dan? I think only Mod and Su Qin are qualified to do so in great Yan dynasty, right?" Fortunately, Wu Qi had another ability, lip reading. He bowed his head, peeking at Yu Qianqian and Yu Wendi from the corner of his eyes, who were whispering to each other in a far distance, carefully analyzing the movements of their lips. Combined with the subtle changes in their expressions and the glances that were darting around, Wu Qi was able to understand what they were saying with 100% certainty. On top of that, there was a layer of faint ripple of restrictive barrier around Yu Wendi and Yu Qianqian. Wu Qi reckoned that they were wearing some treasures that could isolate divine will from probing. Under such circumstances, it would be very strenuous to eavesdrop on the conversation between father and daughter using divine will. Standing behind the old man was an old man with a strange appearance. The old man had a very long neck, and his body was very fat. His body was round like a meatball, but his limbs were thin and long, looking like a meatball with 4 thin matchsticks stuck in it. It gave him a very strange look. The meatball-like body of the old man kept expanding and shrinking, while the surrounding air was constantly being sucked into his body. Then, accompanied by the whistling of the wind, the air was sprayed out from his body. The first man was Xiong Wanling, the lord of Black Wind Gorge in Meng Mountains. He was the demon king who ruled over the forest 30 million miles around Black Wind Gorge in Meng Mountains. He was an almighty cultivator of nascent soul and divine transformation realm, with a cultivation base of mid-stage nascent divinity nearly breaking through to late stage. The 2 brothers, Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin, were the grandsons of Xiong Wanling, while Xiong Qing and his brothers were the sons of his grandsons. There was a gap of several generations between them. There were at least over 3,000 demon bears from Black Wind Gorge, secretly serving in various government offices of Great Yan Dynasty. Their numbers were especially high among the swallows and palace guards. Among all the demon beasts in Meng Mountains, Xiong Wanling was the demon king who had the closest cooperation with Great Yan Dynasty. Following the crowd, Wu Qi rose to his feet and sat down on the mat. Curiously, he looked at the group of people who stood behind Yan Dan on the dais. The grand hall was densely covered with all kinds of restrictive spells, which effectively blocked the probing of divine will. Wu Qi's divine will was different from ordinary cultivators. It was nourished by the innate energies of 5 elements, and was born with the power of thunder tribulation. As a result, it was born with all kinds of magical abilities. Thus, these restrictive spells could not block his probing. However, a restrictive spell was a restrictive spell, and it was still too strenuous for him to use his divine will to eavesdrop on the conversation of others amidst so many restrictive spells. Wu Qi's heart twitched, and a flame of evil flame suddenly rose from his lower abdomen. Before the flame of evil could begin to wreak havoc, the 7 holy deities and devils had already rushed out from his spiritual ocean, swallowing the flame of evil. Suddenly, the figures of the 7 deities and devils became much clearer, singing and dancing while cheering and roaring in Wu Qi's body. Then, Wu Qi pressed his palm onto Lu Qingfeng's back, sucking away the flame of evil desire that suddenly burst out from his body, and fed it to the 7 holy deities and devils. After all, Wu Qi only had a thread of his nascent divinity, and he did not transform his entire soul into a nascent divinity that could leave his body and roam freely. However, none of the other influential members in the Grand Hall had the ability to protect their mind like Wu Qi did. Apart from Yan Xianchen, who had a profound cultivation base and was able to keep a steady mind, all the others had their faces blushed. Chi snorted. There were even a few hundred ministers and nobles who bent their waists and leaped to their feet, hastily walking out of the Grand Hall to change their clothes. The sweet cry of the girl had caused these ministers and nobles to lose their virginity at the same time, making them embarrass themselves on the spot. Needless to say, the fifth girl was Su Meier. She was the direct descendant of the ancient nine-tailed heavenly fox, with a cultivation base of mid-stage nascent divinity realm, and she had already grown 6 tails. She had countless demon girls, including fox demons, flower demons, tree demons, and many other demon girls. Over 70% of the brothels in Great Yan Dynasty were occupied by these demon girls from the Enchanting Palace. Not only were the purses of those men who visited the brothels in high spirits plundered by these demon girls, even their yang energies had contributed greatly to the improvement of the cultivation base of these demon girls from the Enchanting Palace. Standing next to this burly man was an old man with white hair and a body that looked like an ancient pine tree. The old man had a pair of dark green eyes that looked like a pair of supreme-grade emeralds. He had a huge frame, but was very skinny. A white robe draped over his body, making him look even more skinny, as if he could be blown away by the wind. The old man's steps were steady and light, as if his toes could never touch the ground. He followed closely behind Yan Dan and entered the Grand Hall. Raising his head, Wu Qi gave Yu Wendy and Yu Qianqian an eerie glance with his eyes as sharp as lightning bolts. Both father and daughter had a quick reaction, as they immediately sensed that Wu Qi was looking at them again. With a straight face, Yu Qianqian tilted her head up proudly and looked at the gold-plated patterns on the ceiling. Meanwhile, Yu Wendy smilingly raised up his wine cup and gave a toast to Wu Qi from a distance. Wu Qi also raised up his empty wine cup and gave a toast to Yu Wendy. After that, he picked up his empty wine cup and made a gesture of drinking the wine. Among the 4 men, one of them was a middle-aged burly man. He stood nearly 15 feet tall, taller than the rest of the men around him. His skin was dark, and his face was covered with thick black hair. When he walked, the Grand Hall was trembling slightly. His eyes shone with a bizarre golden hue, and a wild heat could be sensed amidst the coldness in his eyes. An endless power was hidden in his enormous body. Just by looking at his body, Wu Qi instinctively felt that he could easily lift up a great mountain. Amidst the sound of footsteps, Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, Qin Wuyang, and Tian Guang led a group of 20 to 30 men and women into the Grand Hall, each with different looks and appearances, and took their seats on the second level of the dais. Meanwhile, Yan Dan and his company had also taken their seats on the highest level of the dais. Su Meier smiled again. Then, the expression on her seductive face turned solemn, and a strong cold aura burst out from her body. In an instant, she had transformed from a seductive girl who could topple all living beings into a pure, holy, and inviolable saint lady. Her cold and dignified gaze swept across the crowd. The bodies of all the influential nobles, who were still harboring lustful thoughts just a moment ago, trembled, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over their heads. It was so cold that their bodies kept shivering, and the flame of desire in their bodies had long vanished without a trace. Yu Wendy narrowed his eyes and looked thoughtfully at the dais. He shook his head lightly and said in a low voice, "Let's wait and see first." "Let's wait and see." Hee, this is really interesting, really interesting. The reaction of Yan Dan and Lao Ai has exceeded my expectation. What will they do next? Are they really going to exert all their strength and fight a life and death battle with that man from Daqin Dynasty? Princess Zhanglu, with her back shrouded in 5-colored divine rays, was winking at Wu Qi and snickering at him. She kept showing her teeth and brandishing her claws at Wu Qi, and she was just short of jumping down from the dais and playing with Wu Qi. She was the happiest person when Wu Qi won in the drill ground today. Wu Qi had forcibly formed his Jin Dan with the mystic technique of stealing energy, and his cultivation base had caught up with Princess Xiangli's. It made Princess Xianglu feel an indescribable joy. Chapter 207. On the dais, the 5 demon kings remained motionless. However, on the second dais, the group of 20 to 30 great demons who stood side by side with Jing Ku and the others had unleashed an enormous demonic aura, which blanketed the entire grand hall. The demonic aura that felt like a corporeal substance pervaded the grand hall, causing the members of Great Yen Imperial Clan, nobles, and ministers to feel their bodies tighten. Their bodies were drenched in cold sweat, and they dropped to their knees in terror. Sitting on the dais, Yen Dan was smiling as he looked at the members of Great Yen Imperial Clan and ministers, who kept quiet out of fear. A fierce gleam that was as sharp as a blade flashed in his eyes. I don't care what you, the ministers of Great Yen Dynasty, have in mind, what you are plotting behind the scenes, whether you are coveting the throne of Yen Dan, whether you are plotting something against the world of Great Yen Dynasty. When the terrifying strength that could easily destroy the lives of everyone was revealed, all the proud sons of the heavens, all the sect masters of the noble clans, all the high and mighty officials, all of them had to obediently kneel down and bow their heads in submission. Great Yen Dynasty can only have one supreme emperor, and that is Yen Dan. You stand high and mighty in front of the people, you can call the wind and summon the rain in Great Yen Dynasty, and with just a word from you, you can decide the life and death of millions of people. But, you must remember that it is Yen Dan who gave you the status, the power, and the position. He is the emperor, and you are his ministers. This is your duty. All of a sudden, Yen Dan burst into a loud laughter. Behind his back, a grayish-white spirit light towered into the sky. Amidst the grayish-white spirit light that contained the transformations of life and death, the ever-changing aura of life and death, an ancient-looking and heavy wheel emanating an immense cold breeze, slowly rose up. The wheel measured 60 feet in diameter and 10 feet in thickness. Its entire body was engraved with countless ancient, profound, and unrecognizable runes. 6 lines of dim light divided the wheel into 6 equal parts. Vaguely, patterns of humans, ghosts, animals, and many other strange creatures could be seen looming on its surface. Wu Qi gave it a quick glance, and in an instant, he associated it with one of the famous treasures in Scroll of Stealing. The Disc of Heavenly Tao Transmigration was an acquired spirit treasure crafted by a group of almighty experts, and it possessed an unimaginably magical power. To the demons, the Heavenly Tao Reincarnation Disc was extremely useful. The bodies of fiendish demons were born with evil and ferocious qi that could not be tolerated by the heavens and earth. This was especially true when one was a fiendish demon. It was unknown how much evil they had committed in their previous lives before they were reincarnated as a fiendish demon. With the evil karma from their previous lives, the power of their thunder tribulation was comparable to that of those unlucky Long Bow Kingdom people. The power of the thunder tribulation was extremely strong, and only 1 in 10,000 demons could survive it. However, once Yen Dan activated the Heavenly Tao Reincarnation Disc, the demons would have a chance to enter the cycle of reincarnation once again. They would be able to erase the karma of their past lives, allowing their cultivation path to be much smoother. All the demons and devils that cultivated from beasts were cruel and brutal by nature. Their minds were unstable, and when they encountered the inner devil or the heavenly devil tribulation, their primordial spirits would be easily devoured by the devils and they would suffer a great calamity. The Heavenly Tao Reincarnation Disc could allow demons to enter the Tao of Reincarnation and experience the 3000 red dust. It could stabilize the demons' Tao hearts and prevent them from being affected by external factors. With the protection of the Heavenly Tao Reincarnation Disc, the demons and devils would have a great Tao that could lead them straight to immortality. No wonder the 5 demon kings had joined Great Yen Dynasty, and no wonder a few reclusive demons and devils had become the secret sinecures of Great Yen Dynasty. Today, Yen Dan had even burned the imperial edict to the heaven, officially worshipping the 5 demon kings and becoming the imperial advisor of Great Yen Dynasty. With this, the demon kings and the fate of Great Yen Dynasty were connected, and they could be strengthened by the energy of the human emperor of Great Yen Dynasty. Every word and action of theirs would be strengthened by the faith of the billions of people in Great Yen Dynasty. As long as they could protect the safety of the people of Great Yen Dynasty, they would be protected by the virtues. For these formidable demon kings, the thing they feared the most was the heaven immortal tribulation that would befall them on the day they formed their nascent divinity. It was extremely difficult for demons and devils to attain the righteous fruit. Among 1,000,000 demons and devils, not even one could survive the heaven immortal tribulation. However, as long as they were protected by the virtues of Great Yen Dynasty, and were strengthened by the faith of billions of people, the power of the heaven immortal tribulation would be reduced to nothing. As long as their cultivation base reached a certain level, they could easily attain the righteous fruit of heaven immortal. With the help of the heavenly Tao reincarnation disc, and the protection from the fortune of Great Yen Dynasty, the 5 demon kings could only obediently become the imperial advisors of Great Yen Dynasty, the loyal fighters of Great Yen Dynasty. With the help of these 5 demon kings and the millions upon millions of demon descendants under their command, the internal strife of Great Yen Dynasty was nothing but a joke in Yen Dan's eyes. When Wanying Dragon King attacked the Qin army, he had easily gathered millions of great demons from Longyuan River. How many demons and devils did these 5 demon kings, who shared the same fame as him, have under their command? Before such an army of demons and devils, no matter how ambitious a hero in Great Yen Dynasty was, he or she would have to obediently kowtow before Yen Dan, throwing away the tiny bit of ambition in his or her heart into the latrine. What a great strategy! Looking at the smiling face of Yen Dan, Wu Qi could not help but praise him. It looked like Yen Dan had also prepared countless trump cards. Just this disc of heavenly Tao reincarnation, which was crafted by imitating the 6 paths of reincarnation, had a power not weaker than the cauldron of Yu. It would not be easy for Yingzheng to compete with Great Yen Dynasty. The disc of heavenly Tao reincarnation was one of the top acquired spirit treasures found in the Scroll of Stealing. Yen Dan's enormous aura mixed with the demon aura of those great demons, suppressing all the courtiers in the Grand Hall, making them not dare to move. The faces of Yen Xianchen and the others turned ashen. Cold sweat kept dripping down from their chins, drenching the carpet before them. Their minds were blank as they stared at Yen Dan, who had the huge disc hovering above his head. They had no idea where this huge disc of heavenly Tao reincarnation came from. As the strongest figure among the 8 governors of Great Yen Dynasty, even Yen Xianchen had no idea that Yen Dan actually owned an acquired spirit treasure like this. Inside the huge disc of heavenly Tao reincarnation, 2 bright lights of gray and white were blinking vaguely. When the bright lights moved, the bodies of all the people in the Grand Hall twitched, as if their souls were about to be crushed and shattered by the bright lights. At the same time, it was as if there were countless frightening existences rushing out from the 6 paths and devouring their souls. Under such a pressure, none of the civil and military officials in the imperial court dared to have any other thoughts. Yen Dan smiled, a very happy smile. He said softly, over the years, Yen Dan has been in a secluded cultivation, seeking for a breakthrough. Therefore, he has handed over the power of the imperial court to the 8 governors. Recently, Yen Dan has broken through the bottleneck, and his cultivation base has improved at a tremendous pace. Not only has his nascent soul attained mastery, but he will soon step into the nascent divinity realm with the help of the spirit treasure, truly achieving the Tao of immortality and living a free and unfettered life. Therefore, the system of supervising the imperial court by the 8 governors is no longer needed. Taking a deep breath, Yen Dan said, "Ma Yi, draft up a decree. From today onwards, I will personally supervise the imperial court. All government orders without my personal signature and seal are considered as arbitrary orders. All the people of Great Yen are not allowed to obey them. The power of Great Yen's 3 prime ministers and 9 ministers, as well as many government offices, will be taken back. All the ministers will report directly to Yen Dan. From today onwards, the 8 governors will be completely dismissed." The few thousand ministers in the Grand Hall answered in unison, "We will obey your Majesty's decree." Yen Dan nodded his head satisfyingly. He stuck out his chest and said in a cold voice, "In Great Yen, there is a mortal enemy named Daqin. All the ministers do not need to know the origin of Daqin. They only need to know that Daqin is the mortal enemy of Great Yen. In this world, if Great Yen exists, there will be no Daqin. If Daqin exists, there will be no Great Yen. The army of Daqin has appeared in Meng Mountains, less than 400,000 miles away from the border of Great Yen. Therefore, I've decided to prepare the army and fight a life-and-death battle with Daqin." Abruptly, Yen Dan rose to his feet and said in a cold voice, "The posts of imperial judges of front, back, left, and north will be abolished, and they will be replaced by the four-field headquarter of north, south, east, and west. They will be responsible for supervising the vassal kingdoms in the four directions, organizing their armies and fighting a life-and-death battle with Daqin. The former four imperial judges of front, back, left, and north will be replaced by the chief supervisors of the four-field headquarter of Great Yen Dynasty. They will be promoted to the positions of east, west, north, and south generals. Their positions are comparable to the chief generals of Great Yen Dynasty, and they will be responsible for the preparation of provisions and armaments, the mobilization of soldiers, the maintenance of city defenses, and the strict inspection of military law and discipline." Yen Dan snorted coldly and said with a stern voice, "As long as Daqin is not wiped out, the four-field headquarter will never be disbanded. All the vassal kingdoms under the heaven must obey the orders of the chief supervisors of the four-field headquarter according to their territories. They will mobilize all the soldiers and manpower in their kingdom, and follow Great Yan's army to launch a punitive expedition against Daqin." Wu Qi narrowed his eyes, gently poking Lu Qingfeng's back with his finger. Lu Qingfeng's body tensed up. He was so nervous that he almost burst out laughing. The four-field headquarter had the power to control all the military resources, manpower, and financial resources of the four vassal kingdoms. This power was much greater than the power of Zhuoguozheng. On top of that, the four chief supervisors of the four-field headquarter had the power to enforce the military law, which meant that they could use the military law to punish the monarchs and ministers of the vassal kingdoms. This power was too great to be described with words. After that, Yen Dan gave out another imperial decree. The chief supervisors of the four-field headquarter were the chief supervisors of the logistics department and the director of military law. Meanwhile, in the four-field headquarter, the ones who were responsible for fighting the Daqin dynasty with real weapons were the other generals. The general of the Westfield headquarter that Lu Qingfeng was in charge of was the chief general of Great Yen Dynasty, Fan Yuqi. The main force of the war was the Black Swallow Army, which Fan Yuqi had been secretly training all these years. In short, Fan Yuqi was in charge of marching the army and fighting the war, and Lu Qingfeng was in charge of everything outside the war. The pay, provisions, the mobilization and recruitment of reserve soldiers, even the repair of the city wall, the reorganization of the outposts, the execution of the military law, were all under the responsibility of Lu Qingfeng. As the Westfield headquarter happened to be facing the threat of Qin army, Yen Dan had given Lu Qingfeng a special authority. In the vassal kingdoms governed by the Westfield headquarter, if any monarch refused to obey his orders, Lu Qingfeng could execute them first and report them later. As long as it was the resources needed by the army, Lu Qingfeng could freely assemble them on the spot. Even if he had to rob all the treasuries of those vassal kingdoms, as long as it was helpful to the war, Lu Qingfeng could make the decision arbitrarily. Lu Qingfeng respectfully walked out of the ranks, and received the decree from Ma Yi, which was specially given to him, granting him the right to exercise absolute power. Even the 5 imperial advisors who had just been appointed by Great Yen Dynasty would lead countless disciples, sons, and grandsons to follow the army under the command of the Westfield headquarter. Of course, for those small fries, they could never expect the 5 imperial advisors to lend a hand. Only when they were facing a cultivator of Daqin who possessed a similar overall strength would they lend a hand. Lu Qingfeng only had the authority to control them, but he didn't have the authority to order them to mobilize and enforce the law. After that, the official imperial decree was issued. The power of Great Yan Dynasty, which was once scattered among the 8 princes and even Crown Prince Yan Qijuan, was now fully reclaimed into the hands of Yan Dan. Without Yan Dan's personal approval and personal seal, all the orders issued by the various government offices of Great Yan Dynasty had lost their legal validity. Under the threat of 5 demon kings and several dozens of great demons, all the influential members and ministers in the Grand Hall bowed their heads and obeyed the orders, not daring to show any dissenting expression. Even Lao Ai, who had just been conferred the title of Prince of Changxin of Great Yan Dynasty, was sitting on the dais. He kept twisting his body, as if there were thorns growing under his buttocks. Under the pressure of 5 demon kings, even this peerless evil man, Lao Ai, seemed to have become much more reserved. Looking at the strange expression on the faces of all his ministers, Yan Dan could not help but clap his hands and laugh out loud. "Come, today is the imperial banquet. My dear ministers, please enjoy yourselves to your heart's content." After a brief moment of pondering, Yan Dan said in a deep voice, "Old Mr. Mo, Old Mr. Su, Old Mr. Sun, and Mr. Han Fei, please come up here and have a drink with me." Mod, Su Qin, and Wu Qi were not surprised. However, Han Fei and old Mr. Sun had shaken Wu Qi and made his body turn stiff, as if countless thunderbolts were running through his body. "Old Mr. Sun, could it be Sun Kuang?" Chapter 208. Wu Qi shook his head and said in a low voice, "The reason why they are called Jin Dan human immortals is that the Jin Dan realm is mainly focused on accumulating energies, and does not require any enlightenment of the heavenly Tao. As long as your fleshly body can withstand it, you will be able to form Jin Dan in the shortest time possible, and improve the cultivation base of Jin Dan realm. Within 1 month, I want you to form Jin Dan, and try your best to improve your Jin Dan realm." Yu Yi rose to his feet, looked at Wu Qi indifferently, and said, "Yu Yi is a military general. A military general only cares about life and death, not right or wrong." The atmosphere in the Grand Hall had become very strange. Some ministers were stealthily glancing at Su Qin, Han Fei, and Sun Kuang from the corner of their eyes. Su Qin, the sour master who spent most of his time in Great Yan Dynasty's editorial institute, had suddenly appeared on the drill ground and made a bet with so many influential officials, which had frightened many people. Out of the blue, he even climbed up the dais and drank with Yan Dan, which had frightened many people even more. Yan Dan looked down at Yu Yi, who was kneeling on one knee. After a long while, he said coolly, "It was Yu Su who came to challenge him, and both of them signed a contract of life and death. Yu Su was killed by Duke of Tianyun in a fair duel." Yan Dan said coolly, "When Duke of Tianyun was young, he had consumed some spirit herbs, which made his fleshly body as strong as a flood dragon. Therefore, he was able to form his Jin Dan with the help of external pills. Furthermore, he accidentally obtained 2 acquired spirit pearls in the Rare Treasures Conference, which allowed him to kill Yu Su. No one caused any mischief in this duel. Do you understand, Yu Yi?" As for Sun Kuang and Han Fei, not many people in Great Yan Imperial Court knew them. Seclusion was a very frightening term. With Sun Kuang's prowess in teaching disciples like Li Si and Han Fei, he had lived in seclusion in Great Yan Dynasty for over 2,000 years, and it was not until today that many ministers and nobles in Great Yan Dynasty knew about him. How many disciples had he taught during these 2,000 years? And how many of them could be compared with Li Si and Han Fei? How many people in the imperial court were Sun Kuang's disciples? Xiong Wanling and the other 4 demon kings, who were calm and composed when they first appeared on the stage, as if they did not care about anything, became restless after Mod and Senior Mr. Sun ascended the stage. The 5 demon kings kept casting sidelong glances at Mod and old Mr. Sun, and from time to time, their demonic auras would leak out. Under the threat of the demonic aura, Mod and old Mr. Sun had no choice but to release their auras to contend against them. The officials in the hall suddenly straightened their backs and looked at Wu Qi with schadenfreude. Several eunuchs hurriedly closed the doors of the main hall, blocking the cold wind and snow outside the main hall. However, the cold wind that had already blown into the main hall still circled around the main hall for a while before completely dissipating. The wind blew the candles, and the light and shadows in the main hall swayed. Their auras merged into one, and they actually faintly showed signs of resisting the 5 demon kings. This caused even Wu Qi to be shocked. Abruptly, Jingke placed both hands on the wine table and stared at Yu Yi with wide eyes like a tiger that was about to burst into a rage. Gao Jianli grabbed Jingke's shoulder and pushed him back into the seat. Meanwhile, Tian Guang pressed his hand on Jingke's thigh, using all his strength to prevent him from getting up. Only Qin Wuyang continued to drink and eat as if nothing had happened, as if nothing had anything to do with him. Keep them in the ring. There are energy stones and various materials in it, which you can use to study formations. There are also spirit talismans, which I robbed from the elders of Heavenly Spirit sect. Many of them are very powerful, and can even kill earth immortals of nascent soul realm. Be careful when using them. I also robbed all kinds of life-saving spirit pills, so it's always better to carry them with you. Most importantly, there are 15 kilograms of Flood Dragon blood essence in it, and a body-strengthening technique of Flood Dragon clan. Absorb them all within 3 days according to the law. MOD had also created the MO sect, occupying a small area and teaching it to his disciples. From time to time, some influential members of Great Yen would ask him to craft various magical items for their descendants. But, who were Sun Kuang and Han Fei? What did they do? What made them qualified to sit on the dais and drink with Yen Dan? Furthermore, they looked so calm and composed. Clearly, they were very familiar with Yen Dan. Both of them were discussing how to improve Lu Qingfeng's cultivation base, and how to ensure that he would not self-detonate and kill himself during the process. All of a sudden, the door of the grand hall was pushed open, and a strong gust of wind brought in a great amount of snowflakes. The cold air brought along a faint smell of blood, as Yu Yi, clad in a heavy black armor and a black cloak, walked into the grand hall with a sword in his hand. Amidst the flickering shadows, a strange smile emerged on Yu Wendi's face, which was caught by Wu Qi. If not for someone playing tricks on me, Yu Su should not have died, said Yu Yi in a deep voice. Wu Qi turned his head and saw a drop of cold sweat trickling down from Yu Wendi's forehead, dripping down from his nose and into his wine cup. Abruptly, Wu Qi straightened his body and said with a cold grin, "So, I am the one who deserved to die. Yu Yi, is that what you mean? Your grandson provoked me with a spear, pierced through Wu Qi's shoulder, and called Wu Qi a rascal, an assassin. An assassin who stabbed his mother. That was the only impression Wu Qi had of Han Fei. No one could imagine that he was actually a monster with incredible intelligence and talent. He raised the wine cup and drank the wine, picked up the chopsticks, and ate the meat. His every movement was like a wooden puppet, precise, yet with a trace of stiffness. Su Qin kept chattering beside him, and no one knew what he was talking about. But, Han Fei only moved his lips occasionally and said a few words to Su Qin out of courtesy. On the dais, the 5 demon kings, MOD, and Sun Kuang, who were fighting with their auras, had retracted their auras. Once a nascent divinity cultivator retracted his aura, he would not be able to release any aura, making him look no different from an ordinary old man. Lu Qingfeng's eyes lit up, as he finally understood what Wu Qi meant. A formation master could always challenge an enemy with a higher cultivation base. As long as he could form the Jin Dan, he would be able to construct a formation of 7 stars, 8 trigrams, and 9 palaces, which was more than enough to trap an ordinary nascent soul cultivator. Even if he could not kill them, he could at least save his own life. Once an all-out war broke out between Daqin and Great Yen, he would have a greater chance of saving his own life. Once again, Yu Wendi noticed Wu Qi. With a smile on his face, he raised up his wine cup and drank the drop of cold sweat together with the wine. What was even more frightening was that when MOD and Sun Kuang joined hands, they could faintly fight against the demonic energy unleashed by the 5 demon kings. What kind of cultivation was this? What kind of strength was this? Old Mr. Mod had a great reputation in Great Yen Dynasty, so it was not surprising for him to have such a cultivation base. But, what about Sun Kuang? An unknown Sun Kuang actually possessed the cultivation base of nascent divinity realm. Were there any other unknown and fearsome figures like him? If there were still such fearsome figures hiding in Great Yen Dynasty, how many more of them were there? Lu Qingfeng took the ring and put it on his finger. He asked excitedly, after refining the flood dragon's blood essence, will I be as invulnerable as a flood dragon? Wu Qi shook his head and said in a low voice, it's too late. West Headquarter will be the first to face Daqin's army. As the chief supervisor, you are responsible for the logistics and military law of West Headquarter. As the commander-in-chief of Daqin, I will assassinate a man like you first. Without sufficient overall strength, you will be killed in less than 3 days. With great effort, Wu Qi suppressed the shock in his heart, then began to steal a glance at Han Fei, who was sitting side by side with Su Qin. Is this the sharp claw of Great Yen hiding in the dark? Occasionally, when Han Fei revealed his horn, it was enough to make Wu Qi's muscles tense up, and almost instinctively, he was ready to flee at any time. In fact, Sun Kuang was not a threat to Wu Qi, and there was no enmity between them. But, the overall strength he had shown was too strong, and what he represented was too frightening. Wu Qi was like a little rabbit who heard the roar of a ferocious beast, trying to flee out of instinct. Lu Qingfeng covered his face with a wry smile and complained in a low voice, there are many things to deal with in Imperial Judge Court. These days, there are many things to deal with. Fortunately, Chu Yuan and the others are here, and they can help me share some of the burden. After these days, I think I can have some free time to improve my cultivation base and study the arts of heaven patching formation. Even if Mod did not mention it, Wu Qi was quite familiar with him. But, according to Yan Dan's introduction, old Mr. Sun was indeed Sun Kuang, whom Wu Qi had guessed. He was a minister of Zhao's state during the last years of the Warring States period, and the master of Han Fei and Li Si. He was a subject of Zhao, but no one knew why he had abandoned Zhao and lived in seclusion in Great Yen. Yu Su will not die, said Yu Yi in a deep voice. As a man who knew Sun Kuang's background, Wu Qi felt his scalp go numb, and cold sweat kept breaking out from all over his body. Wu Qi sneered maliciously and said, sweat and urine are almost the same in composition, the only difference is the place where they flow out. So, this fellow is a man who likes to drink urine. Staring coldly at Yu Wendi, Wu Qi sighed and said, if you have not done anything wrong, why should you be afraid of Sun Kuang and Han Fei? Editor's Yard. Editor's Yard. This is the territory of Yu Clan. So, this old fellow has been hiding in Editor's Yard all this while? Interesting, interesting. Wu Qi just sneered, with a five-colored gleam flickering faintly in his eyes. Yu Yi gave Wu Qi a cold glance, then turned to Yan Dan, cupped his fist and said, Your Majesty, please forgive me for returning to the capital without permission. I'll return to the front line now and put down the rebellion. As for Yu Su, I'll bring him to the front line to temper him. Duke of Tianyun, remember, you have one more enemy in Great Yen. Wu Qi cursed angrily, relying on his cultivation base of peak stage Jin Dan, Yu Su challenged me, a Xiantian Daoist, with his cultivation base of peak stage Jin Dan. I, Wu Qi, am lucky to have forcefully condensed Jin Dan with a mystic technique of stealing energy, and killed him in front of so many people. Yu Yi, could it be that only your family members can kill me, but I can't kill with my blade? Clenching his fists tightly, Wu Qi laughed and said, if you don't want to explode into pieces, you'll have to work hard to refine these flood dragon blood essences. Only with a strong enough fleshly body can you withstand the impact of energies and condense Jin Dan. With the overall strength of Jin Dan, the power of the formations you can deploy will be at least dozens of times stronger. And, a master of formation can always challenge enemies who are stronger than you. After searching for a while, Wu Qi gave Lu Qingfeng 2 storage rings with a large capacity. Yu Yi cupped his fist and bowed to Yan Dan, then spun and strode out of the grand hall. Only a human immortal of Jin Dan realm could achieve such a rapid advancement. With a strong fleshly body that could withstand the impact of energies, one could quickly condense Jin Dan and improve their cultivation base. When one stepped into the realm of nascent soul, one would have to begin to comprehend the heaven and earth, fusing the Tao of heaven and earth into one's nascent soul. Only then would one be able to keep improving his cultivation base. At that point of time, one could still use this evil technique that could improve one's cultivation base rapidly, but if one's foundation was unstable, the consequences would be fatal. After taking 100 steps into the grand hall, Yui knelt down on one knee. He bowed deeply and said with a deep voice, "Your Majesty, my youngest son, Yu Su, has been killed." He picked up the wine cup and gave a toast to Yu Wendy. After that, he turned his head and said to Lu Qingfeng with a low voice, "Now that I don't have the overall strength, it will be hard for me to stay in Great Yen Dynasty." West Guarding General, the chief supervisor of Great Yen Dynasty's West Field headquarters, are you still a cultivator of respiration tier of Xiantian realm? During the imperial banquet, apart from Yen Dan, who was always calm and confident, perhaps only Princess Xianglu, who never took anything to heart, was enjoying the food. All the other people, including Wu Qi, felt like chewing wax. They ate listlessly, and their eyes kept darting back and forth in the surroundings. Chapter 209. Staring at Yu Yi's back as he walked out of the grand hall, Yen Dan shook his head helplessly. Breathing out a heavy sigh, Yen Dan turned to Wu Qi and said, "Yu Yi, the minister of Great Yen." Wu Qi, the minister of Great Yen. As the monarch of Great Yen, I can't be partial to anyone. Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi, you will follow Chengfen to the Westfield headquarters, and you will be responsible for dispatching the military forces of all vassal kingdoms in the west, preparing for the war. I will appoint you as the deputy chief supervisor of Westfield headquarters, and the general of the Westfield headquarters. You, take care of yourself. Wu Qi did not say anything, but bowed at Yen Dan. This is called not being partial. You are obviously taking Yu Yi's side, and it is his family members who are being rude, yet you want Wu Qi to avoid them? This is what you call being partial. Nevertheless, Wu Qi also understood that Yen Dan had been taking good care of him. By sending him out of Ji City, avoiding Yu Yi, who was in the middle of a war, and even giving him a military post, he was protecting him. Otherwise, if Wu Qi was allowed to stay in Ji City, Yu Yi would have countless ways to plot against him, and it would be impossible to guard against any open or covert attacks. After the disturbance caused by Yu Yi, the 5 demon kings, Mod, and Sun Quan, who were secretly fighting against each other, had retracted their aura, raised their cups, drank wine, and enjoyed the meat like everyone else. Without the frightening pressure unleashed by them, the atmosphere in the grand hall gradually returned to normal. The drumming began to play again, while a large group of dancers drifted out from the back of the hall, singing and dancing in the middle of the hall. Indeed, it was a prosperous and luxurious place with endless enjoyment. Then, Wu Qi began to murmur to Lu Qingfeng in a low voice. Word by word, he was teaching Lu Qingfeng the essentials of cultivating the body-strengthening technique of Flood Dragon. After all, it was not an easy task for Lu Qingfeng to absorb 15 kilograms of Flood Dragon blood essence in 3 days. The blood essence of Flood Dragons in Black Dragon's spirit ring was the essence of all Flood Dragons that Yingzheng had killed over the years. Without Wu Qi's detailed guidance, Lu Qingfeng might go astray while channeling his energy. Before his body could be strengthened, he would become neither a man nor a dragon. That would be a real headache. While the two of them were having a heated discussion, the first batch of dancers had just retreated, and when the second batch of dancers were about to come up, a young man clad in a light cyan official robe and in high spirits abruptly rose from his seat and walked to the center of the hall. He bowed to Yen Dan in a loud and clear voice and said, "Your Majesty, I have something to say to Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi." Yen Dan was taken aback. On the platform, Su Qin spat out a mouthful of wine and pointed at the young man. "Mu Yi, what are you doing?" The youngest son of Su Qin, 32 years old, Su Mai, the editor of National History of Great Yen Dynasty's Editing Academy, was a young scholar who spent all day singing about romance and painting. Only the core members of Great Yen Dynasty, such as Yen Dan, knew that Su Mai was also known as the ever-changing Yin and Yang. In some aspects, he was a genius who was even more monstrous than Su Qin. But, geniuses were always freaks, and without a doubt, Su Mai was one of them. Su Mai's weirdness lay in the fact that he had a totally different understanding of the ways of the world, and he had offended many of his colleagues in Editing Academy. As one of the noblest civil officials in Great Yen Dynasty, Su Mai would often punch and kick his colleagues, and often curse them with foul language. If not because Su Qin was the chief editor of National History of Editing Academy, Su Mai would have long been kicked out of the imperial court by his colleagues. Su Qin felt a headache when he saw Su Mai, and Yen Dan felt even worse. Laughing dryly, Yen Dan shook his head at Su Qin, then smiled gently at Su Mai and asked, "Mai, do you have anything to say to Duke Tianyun?" "Hee, both of you are talented young men, and it's a good time for you to get to know each other." Su Mai clapped his hands forcefully, giggled and said, "Your Majesty, my father is also the imperial advisor of Great Yen Dynasty. But all these years, he has been pretending to be ignorant and has even forgotten the identity of the imperial advisor. Because of that, I have to endure the anger of a bunch of useless fools in the editorial institute. My father has been telling me to keep a low profile, 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 and keep a low profile. Sigh, now that you've asked my father to come up here and drink with you, I don't think he needs to keep a low profile anymore." Yen Dan blinked his eyes quickly, staring at Su Mai, who seemed to have a one-track mind. With a wry smile, he said, "Yes. Daqin is eyeing us like a tiger, and Great Yen Dynasty has to gather all its forces to face the enemy. Mr. Su, as the imperial advisor of Great Yen Dynasty, there's no need for you to hide in the imperial court anymore." Su Mai burst out into a loud laughter. He clapped his hands, then turned to those officials who sat behind Yu Wendy and said, "Did you hear that? Be more respectful to me in the future. Remember this face of mine, Su Mai. When I was born, I was conferred the title of Marquis. Damn it. I've tolerated all of you for too long." Just like Wu Qi, Su Mai cursed in front of Yen Dan and so many top-notch nobles of Great Yen Dynasty. Su Qin's old face turned red, just like a monkey's butt. Yet, Su Mai stuck out his chest proudly, turned to look at Wu Qi and said, "Duke Wu Qi, I have something to discuss with you. Whether you agree or not, you have to agree. In short, my niece has to marry no one but you." Wu Qi was struck dumb. No one but Wu Qi? Lu Qingfeng turned to look at Wu Qi with a shocked expression, lowered his voice and murmured, "You've offended a girl from Su clan?" On the dais, Princess Xianglu had her eyes fixed on Wu Qi. A murderous gleam flickered in her eyes like the edge of a sword. When she saw the blank and shocked expression on Wu Qi's face, Princess Xianglu knitted her brows and pondered for a brief moment. Immediately, the murderous gleam in her eyes grew stronger, and she fixed her gaze on Su Mai like a mad she-wolf. Su Qin even slapped on the table and cried out, "Mai, what nonsense are you talking about? What nonsense are you talking about? Your niece? Who are you talking about?" Su Mai tilted his head up, laughed complacently and said, "Of course, it's little Su. She is 14 years old now, and it's time for her to get married. I'll make the decision here and marry little Su to Duke of Tianyun. With that, Duke of Tianyun won't be able to offend Princess Xianglu. Ha, among all the young men of Great Yen Dynasty, which one of them can surpass me in terms of talent, character, appearance, and appearance? If it's Princess Xianglu, she'll marry no one but me." Su Qin sat stiffly on his knees on the dais. Looking at his expression, it seemed like he really wanted to strangle Su Mai right now. Yen Dan's body was shivering. He really wanted to turn his head and let out a wild laugh, but as the monarch of Great Yen Dynasty, he had to keep a straight face and hold back his laughter. Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, Tian Guang, and the others stared at Su Mai as if they were looking at a ghost. Suddenly, Gao Jianli shook his head lightly and murmured under his breath, "Old Mr. Su Qin is a great man, but why is his youngest son an idiot? By marrying his youngest niece to Wu Qi, does that mean Wu Qi can't marry a princess? This is indeed a great strategy, an excellent strategy." Tian Guang said coldly, "This is the so-called drastic measures, a great strategy indeed." Initially, Yan Dan could still hold back his laughter, but when he heard Tian Guang's indescribably cold joke, he suddenly burst out into a wild laughter. All the ministers and generals in the grand hall stared at the complacent Su Mai with a dumbfounded expression. One after another, they bowed their heads, covered their faces with their sleeves, and started giggling. Yu Wendi and Yu Qianqian had a strange smile on their faces, bowing their heads and giggling as well. From the corner of their eyes, they were sneaking glances at Su Mai, who stood proudly in the center of the grand hall. Wu Qi shook his head helplessly. He rose to his feet, cupped his fist and bowed deeply to Su Qin, and said, "Old mister, Wu Qi doesn't have any designs on your youngest granddaughter." Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, turned to Su Mai, and said, "Su Mai, Grand Marquis Su, why does Wu Qi want to marry your youngest niece? Have you asked your father about this? Have you asked your niece's father, who is also your elder brother, what does he think about this?" With a complacent expression, Su Mai took out a fan and slowly fanned himself, then said complacently, "First, why do you want to marry my youngest niece?" "Because my Su clan has proposed to you. With the mighty reputation of my father, if he wants to marry my daughter, who would dare to refuse?" Su Mai chuckled and continued, "Second, all these years, my father has never paid any attention to the affairs of the clan. All my elder brothers have been wholeheartedly cultivating in seclusion, studying the Tao of Yin and Yang transformation. Therefore, all the affairs of the clan are taken care of by me alone. It's just marrying my youngest niece, of course I can make the decision." Wu Qi clenched his teeth tightly and kept shaking his head. He did not even have the strength to laugh. This Su Mai might be a genius, but he was a simple-minded genius. For a man like him, there was no way to be serious with him. Wu Qi did not even have the mood to get angry with him. He just shook his head and sighed, then returned to his seat. On the dais, Princess Zhanglu stared at Su Mai with a strange look in her eyes, then cried out coldly, "Su Mai, why should I marry you? Even if your youngest niece wants to marry Wu Qi, putting aside whether he wants to marry her or not, why should I marry you when Wu Qi marries your youngest niece?" Su Mai turned to look at Princess Zhanglu with surprise, then asked, "If you don't marry me, who else can Princess marry? Apart from Wu Qi, who else in Great Yan Dynasty can be more handsome than Mai? Who else can be more talented than Mai? He has an elegant demeanor, looks and talent, and comes from an excellent family. He is matchless. If Princess doesn't marry me, who else can she marry?" Princess Zhanglu breathed out a heavy sigh, then grabbed a wine pot and gulped down half a liter of fine wine. When facing a man like Su Mai, even the arrogant Princess Zhanglu had lost her temper. Complacently, Su Mai clamored, "In the past, because of my father, I had to keep a low profile. I couldn't expose the background of my Su clan, I couldn't brag that my father is the imperial advisor of Great Yan Dynasty, and I couldn't brag that I'm already a marquis of Great Yan Dynasty when I was born. Therefore, Su Mai kept a low profile, and didn't want to expose my talents and knowledge in front of anyone." He breathed out a deep sigh and said, "Since it was His Majesty who exposed my father's identity today, don't blame me for acting in such a high-profile manner. Let me make it clear today, apart from Duke of Tianyuan who can compose a beautiful poem and draw a beautiful painting, all the young men of Great Yan Dynasty are just a pile of trash in my heart. Apart from me, none of them are worthy of Princess Zhanglu." Wu Qi raised his head and gave Princess Zhanglu a smile. Princess Zhanglu winked at Wu Qi in a charming manner. Both of them kept exchanging glances with each other, neither of them taking Su Mai seriously. Upon seeing the current situation, Yan Dan and Su Qin both breathed out a sigh at the same time. While Su Qin, whose face was flushed with shame, was about to rise to his feet and scold Su Mai, a clear and sonorous voice suddenly rang out, "Brother Mai, you're wrong. Do you really think there is no one capable in the imperial court of Great Yan Dynasty? Princess Xianglu is a celestial being. How can a scholar like you be worthy of Princess Xianglu? A young man clad in a Kirin battle robe walked slowly out from the ranks. He did not have an outstanding appearance, but he had a ferocious expression, and was shrouded in a murderous aura. Right after this young man rose to his feet, someone else rose from the seats and said, Tiger Qin, Idiot Su, Princess Xianglu, none of you are worthy of her. A series of heavy footsteps rang out. A young man who stood nearly 10 feet tall and looked like an iron tower strode out from the ranks. He dropped to his knees before the dais and said, Your Majesty, Fan Jinqi is willing to be the husband of Princess Xianglu. Wu Qi gazed at these three men coldly. While he was about to say something, the five-colored divine ray behind Princess Xiangli's back suddenly rolled and rolled. A thunderbolt came crashing down from the ceiling of the grand hall, smashing heavily onto the three men's bodies. The electric arcs were blinding, and the thunderclaps were deafening. The three men howled miserably and fell to the ground. The grand hall was thrown into chaos. Chapter 210. Clenching his jaws tightly, Wu Qi fished out 100 heavy ballistae from the black dragon's spirit ring. They were the armor-piercing ballistae which Ying Zhen kept in the ring, and were specially made by Great Qin. They had the power to pierce through the body of nascent soul demon beasts. Using his divine will, he made the ballistae hover in midair, locking onto the coach of Yu clan that was approaching slowly from afar. Suddenly, he changed his tone and shouted. Tonight, Yu clan had paid the price for their nobility and detachment. Noiselessly, Wu Qi sprung out from underground. Like a ghost, he lightly attached himself to the bottom of the coach. He pressed his left ear against the bottom of the coach, and immediately, he could hear the voices of Yu Wendi and Yu Qianqian clearly. Wu Qi felt his heart was twisting. What Yu Wendi said was destined to become a reality in the future. Yu Wendi smiled reservedly. He chuckled, then said in an indifferent tone, I've been plotting for over 100 years, using Wei Merchant to make a few cracks on the impenetrable wall of Great Yan Dynasty. But before I could show my talent, the situation was already messed up by Wu Qi. Since this young man has ruined my plan, I should find some trouble for him. Yu Wendi said proudly, that's the principle. All vassal kingdoms will no longer exist, and the monarchs of those vassal kingdoms will have to live in seclusion in Ji City. However, Great Yan Dynasty has no lack of civil officials to govern the local areas. Therefore, we have to appoint a large number of them to various places. On the other hand, 50% of the civil officials in Great Yan Dynasty, and even all the vassal kingdoms, are from Yu Academy. Once the vassal kingdoms no longer exist, these civil officials will be in control of the local areas, and that will bring us endless benefits. Wu Qi was traveling at top speed underground, following the faint scent of a seed of Qianli Xiang that he had stuck on Yu Wendi's collar when the crowd was moving. Then, he found the coach that Yu Wendi and Yu Qianqian were riding in. Yu clan was a noble clan, and their coach was simple and elegant, emanating a strong air of antiquity. There were only a dozen guards of 30 to 40 years of Hotian realm standing next to the coach. The defense was almost non-existent. From time to time, he would stroke the 2 storage rings on his fingers. The heavy rings made Lu Qingfeng feel very secure. Especially when he thought of the 15 kilograms of rare flood dragon blood in one of the rings, he felt a warmth in his heart. Jin Dan. He also had a chance to condense it into Jin Dan. The sound of fingers tapping on the wooden board could be heard. It seemed that Yu Wendi was deep in thought. Yu Qianqian's voice rang out again, Qianqian understands. With these people helping Yan Dan, and with the threat of Daqin, Great Yan Dynasty could not be shaken in a short period of time. It looks like Qianqian has no choice but to marry a handsome man like those elders. Let's see if Qianqian's children have the chance to stir up trouble in Great Yan. Just when he was pondering about the Yu family, he heard Yu Wendi ask indifferently, speaking of which, other than Su Mai and a few other archery targets, who else do you think can catch your eye? Helpless, Yan Dan could only reprimand Princess Xianglu, then he announced the end of the banquet. Yu Wendy chuckled and said, "Think about it. With your talent and knowledge, you should be able to guess it." Yu Qianqian sneered and said, "For so many years, we, Yu family, have been hiding our strength and biding our time, which has caused us to lose our vigor. If he is willing to become a member of Yu family, he will be able to give us more vigor and courage." However, everyone under the heaven knew that Yu family was the most noble family in Great Yan Dynasty, and they did not have any political enemies. Instead, they were the target that everyone wanted to rope in. They had a transcendent status, and even if they were traveling alone in the streets, they would not encounter any malicious assassins. The dozens of guards of Hotian realm were just for show. Yu family was the only family in Great Yan Dynasty that did not need any guards. Following the crowd, Wu Qi walked out of the imperial palace. Instead of riding on a horse, he boarded Lu Qingfeng's flying coach. Following Wu Qi's wild roar, a shrill and ear-splitting alarm suddenly rang out in the surroundings. After that, a very subtle divine will, which even Wu Qi could barely detect, swept across the surroundings. "There are no outsiders," said Yu Qianqian in a low voice. "Yan Dan, little punk, I've killed the clan leader of Yu family of Great Yan Dynasty today. I'll break one of your arms as a warning to others." Yu Qianqian pondered for a brief moment, then suddenly smiled and said, "Since Great Yan Dynasty has discovered a great amount of spatial breaching spirit gold, the rule of Great Yan Dynasty has become more direct and convenient. Therefore, the vassal kingdoms are no longer needed. Yan Dan will take this opportunity to eradicate the rebellious vassal kingdoms and weaken their power as much as possible. In the future, perhaps, he will completely abolish all the vassal kingdoms, divide them into counties, and set up a county to guard the herdsmen." Wu Qi saw the twisted faces of Su Qin, Fan Yuqi, and Qin Wuyang. When Su Qin and Fan Yuqi returned, they would definitely teach their useless sons and grandsons a harsh lesson. As for Qin Wuyang's twisted face, Wu Qi had no idea what was the reason behind it. Perhaps, he was jealous of Princess Xianglu for not giving face to Qin clan. Who knew? In any case, Wu Qi had decided that he would often find some fun for Qin Wuyang in the future. As for Great Yan Dynasty, they valued the inheritance of the Tao of Master the most. A master for a day, a father for life. "Is there any outsider around?" Yu Wendy asked in a low voice. Escorted by numerous guards, the flying coach drove through 2 streets. Then, right in front of Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi transformed his body into a stream of green and yellow energy, penetrated through the bottom of the flying coach, plunged into the ground, and vanished without a trace. It was as if Lu Qingfeng didn't notice the unusual movement of Wu Qi. With a faint smile on his face, he waved a small carving knife and slowly carved some fine runes on a pillar. The divine will, which was so subtle that even Wu Qi could barely sense, spread out and filled the surroundings. Yu Qianqian said softly, "Your plan is perfect. Su Mai, Fan Jinqi, and Qin Nihu are fighting for Princess Xianglu. What a wonderful plan." A series of rattling noises rang out. 100 ballistae tore through the air soundlessly, dragging long tails of light behind them as they shot towards the flying coach. The dozens of guards and mounts of Yu clan did not even have the chance to let out a cry before they were crushed into meat paste by the frightening power of the ballistae. Wu Qi took a deep breath soundlessly. He sneered in his mind, "So, this is the true face of Yu clan." But, there was one thing that Wu Qi could not understand. Why did Yu clan spend so much effort to stir up trouble in Great Yan Dynasty? Was it just for fun? The muscles on Wu Qi's arm tightened, and he abruptly plunged into the ground. In just a blink of an eye, he had reappeared at the end of the street 3,000 feet away. Yu Wendy sighed lightly, smiled bitterly, and said, "Yan Dan is not a simple man. For generations, Yu clan has been stirring up major events under the heaven, trying to plunge Great Yan Dynasty into chaos. But in the end, the efforts of our ancestors were all turned into nothingness by Yan Dan with various methods. This time, after 100 years of hard work, Yu clan has finally achieved some results. But, little did I expect that Yan Dan would use an open and aboveboard scheme to destroy all our plans. Wu Qi's hair stood up one after another. If not for him concealing his aura with a mystic technique found in Scroll of Stealing, any ordinary escape art of 5 elements would have long been discovered by this divine will. It seemed that this divine will was specially produced to target all kinds of escape arts and mystic techniques. It was similar to the divine abilities found in Scroll of Stealing, such as the Heavenly Vision, Earth-Hearing Grand Magic, which could detect all kinds of subtle and abnormal existences. Yu Wendy breathed out long and short sighs for a while, then solemnly said, Qianqian, through this incident, you have to learn something. Crafty plots and schemes can give you a temporary advantage. But, only by using an open and aboveboard scheme, using the overall situation, and using an unstoppable and powerful force to threaten others, can you truly gain the final advantage. For Yu Clan, selecting officials from these people to oversee the affairs of the Great Yan dynasty was definitely much better than those vassals who had their own clan's benefits and legacy. Those vassal monarchs could not give Yu Clan any face, but the members of Yu Clan would definitely provide the greatest convenience and benefits to Yu Clan. The mighty army of Daqin will arrive at the city gate in a few days. Ministers of Great Yan, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and surrender. Throwing away the carving knife, he lifted the curtain and looked out at the dark night that was filled with wind and snow. Then, Lu Qingfeng said in a low voice, Wu Qi, I've told you before, you and I are brothers, and we will share wealth and honor together. Qingfeng owes you too much. You and I, we are true brothers. Just like the first imperial banquet that Wu Qi attended, the banquet ended hastily. 3 unlucky fellows, who thought highly of themselves and had expressed their feelings to Princess Xianglu, were severely wounded by the thunderbolts unleashed by the enraged Princess Xianglu. If not for the timely treatment from the imperial physicians, these 3 fellows could have changed their occupation and become the subordinates of Ma Yi, the inner minister of Great Yan. Nowadays, those young men of Great Yan are really useless. Yu Su and the others, although they have the beautiful titles of Silver Flood Dragon, Qilin, and Fierce Tiger, they are merely toys in the palm of our hands. They are not considered as outstanding talents. Yu Qianqian sighed softly and said, if there is one man who can make Qianqian like him, Wu Qi is the only one. Although he is a little young, and he has an ambiguous relationship with Xianglu, he is a very good writer of calligraphy and painting, and he also has some wonderful poems in his mind. His cultivation base and conduct are not bad as well, and he has a cruel and merciless character. He is the best supplement for Yu Clan now. Princess Xianglu, who had the cultivation base of early-stage nascent soul realm in her 20s, was regarded as the one and only peerless genius of Great Yan dynasty. Although Princess Xianglu was born with the cultivation base of Xiantian realm, she only had the cultivation base of early-stage Jin Dan realm now. Yu Qianqian, who was over 10 years older than Princess Xianglu, had formed her nascent soul. On top of that, she often held all kinds of poetry and painting meetings, and often traveled with those scholars. Basically, she did not have the time to cultivate in seclusion. Yu Qianqian asked in a low voice, are there any opportunities in the near future? With the appearance of the 5 demon kings, Mod, Sun Kuang, Su Qin, Han Fei, and many other spies have revealed themselves. With that, Yan Dan's reputation has skyrocketed. For the past 100 years, all the methods we've laid out are useless in the face of an absolute strength. Our 100 years of painstaking effort has gone down the drain. With these men, Yan Dan can at least maintain the stability of the imperial court for another 500 years. If we, Yu Clan, want to strike again, we'll have to find a way to strike from these 5 demon kings, Mod, Sun Kuang, and the others. Wu Qi could not help but sneer. Everyone in Great Yan dynasty thought that Yu Clan was a noble clan that was passed down from generation to generation. But, could a truly noble clan possess such a miraculous technique? When Yu Qianqian unleashed her aura and used the mystic technique, Wu Qi could immediately sense her true overall strength, early-stage nascent soul realm. Yu Wendy answered with a deep voice, it's good that you can think in this way. Now is a good opportunity. In the future, the foundation of your child will definitely be stronger than the one we have now. That will give him a greater chance to succeed, and he will be able to get more training. After a long period of silence in the coach, Yu Qianqian's voice was clearly transmitted into Wu Qi's ears. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.